8:30, and I will call to order the budget work study session for February 3rd, 2024. We have a roll call, please. We're not doing a roll call? Okay.
Oh,
We haven't been.
We took it off, but it's on the
Yeah,
agenda.
it's
but-
on there,
yeah.
okay.
I'm sorry.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No opposed? Okay, we have our agenda, so we move right to the study session. I will pass it off to James to start us.
Okay, thank you, sir. So you recall, we met for a good 8 hours or so a couple weeks ago to kind of walk you through most of the information we have to present. And now we're at the point where we have to hopefully whittle down, determine a budget figure we can move forward with. And that's kind of our goal today. But first, I guess, we'll try and address any questions that have come up in that time period, anything you've been looking at or seen, or anything you want to know about from a council standpoint, if there are any.
How much do we need to cut to make a budget?
Well, it depends on the kind of budget you want. Val and I have worked, well, for weeks now and gone through each department multiple times. We've gotten us even to where we are now, which is barely scraping by. You know, you're looking at maybe a 10% fund balance, maybe. Obviously, we've talked before, they recommend 25. Last year, we were at 12 plus. We thought we would maybe try to hold that and grow that this year, which obviously we cannot, not with what we're dealing with now. So with some significant cuts, some of which you're gonna have to agree to, or it will alter the budget, that's kind of where we're sitting. So if we want to advance at all, because anybody you're talking to, whether it's at the state level or here, will tell you this doesn't get any easier. And we had a big valuation increase, granted, most of it was taken away by the rollback, but if we don't have that every year, even 3% growth, which we haven't grown by 3% in quite some time, then this is all even harder yet. And we're doing the same thing every single year if we don't start to become proactive to look at revenue sources that maybe we don't like, look at other things that we're doing to try and consolidate what we have, get back to the core of what this city should be doing instead of branching out in areas we don't need to. And I think everything we've done in the past has been with good reason. Sometimes we have to pull back on it. And that's what we've been kind of working through and looking at is what does our core look like? What are areas we can do without, things like that. And that's just our position, and I'm even gonna put on Val, this is my position, as to what I think we can do to go forward, to ensure we're not having to do this every single year again and again and again and again. Because like I said, it does not get any better. Fiscal 29, it might be a little better, maybe. That's after they take the rest of our levies away. But a lot of debt falls off. I mean, you're looking for those silver linings, that's about all it is. Maybe fiscal 29, so maybe 4 years, maybe. That's assuming all the growth continues, which of course, you know, who knows what will, but. So that's a long-winded answer to kind of whatever budget you're gonna wanna see in the end. Do we wanna barely get by, not quite get by, be on a path to try and grow a little more, to be able to take some more of the hits we're gonna have? Because what we have now in front of us is a bare minimum to cover a couple small things that might hit us, but something large hits us and it'll wipe out, you know, what our fund has, and quickly. So that's not a position we wanna be in, we're in that right now, and we're just hoping to continue forward, and, you know, we've had our reasons, but that is the push, is to start to try and find a way to get better in light of everything that's been going on, so that's where we're at, sir.
And to reiterate for the public's clarification, is it fair to say that these difficulties are a combination of the things that came out of the state legislature last year, as well as residual effects of COVID and expenses and supply chain issues there, as well as the big hit that we got from the change in how the auditors were allocating things last year? Is that correct?
I mean, I think it all plays into it. If you're willing to pinpoint what is and isn't, Yeah, COVID was not pleasant, as everybody remembers. You know, our $30,000-$40,000 trucks are now $80,000. And, you know, we had some of those in process at the time. And so we took a little bit of that hit during that time frame, or we had to, you know, back off services, and we lost some revenue there. Some of it came back, some of it didn't. You know, all that factors into it. What the state legislature did, House File 718, while that'll affect us probably even more going forward, current today, the rollback is what did the worst damage. And, you know, I've always advocated there's other tools that could have used that exist today. We didn't have to go to that extreme measure in how they did it, but that's simply my opinion. So, again, we grew $150 million valuation, total valuation last year, and we could apply $14 million to the tax base. That's a problem. I mean, that is a problem. And that's what everybody's facing. So I think it's a combination of a whole lot of things that got us to the point. Again, we're surviving, but maybe we're greedy. I don't want to just survive. I mean, I think we have to build back to be able to do more. As you'll see, we've cut out almost everything we have in here, project-wise, et cetera. We don't have any debt factored in. We've had to put some staff on administrative leave to see if it continues. I mean, none of this is good. It's just, this is what it takes for us to get to where a point we can survive another year as we go forward, as we continue to grow at 2.9%, but yet everything else is growing at, our insurance is 7 to 9%. And if we want raises, it's 2-3%. And the cost of steel, how far did that go up? And gas and everything else. It just compounds far beyond 3%, which was a good growth year for us. Or 2.9, had it been 3, the state would have took 1 or 2 away, so 2.9. But that's what it takes, and that's what a lot of cities are facing right now, is you can't grow out of this. Because what you could do now has been curbed as well by a couple things. Now, it's not dramatic for cities that are growing 25%, I'm sorry, you're 22, they'll still make that work. But if you're growing at 2 or 3 and now you're cutting that half, that's a problem. And that's kind of what we're seeing, so. Yeah, there's some things in here we're gonna talk about, some of it you're not gonna like, and that's why you're here. We can identify everything we have, but that's what we can do.
What chance is there that some of this will be modified or repealed in the legislature?
I have no
Is there
idea.
some discussion?
No.
Okay.
There's not a lot of discussion on repealing any of the legislation that we've talked about. Not that we've heard, I mean, maybe there is, I'm not.
I think odds are it'll get tighter than it'll get looser.
Yeah. So it's just kind of the environment we're in. You know, we're gonna do what we can with what we have. If we have to make decisions, hard decisions, we're gonna bring them to you, and it's up to you to make them. This is not some decision we're counting on. We're not trying to, you know, shrink and consolidate and look at this. It's what we can present to you to see if this makes sense going forward. And if you don't wanna do it, I don't care, that's fine. We'll find another way to continue forward. That's what we're trying to do. The rest of this is just possibilities based on what you see regionally or cities our size, which I hate to compare to, but individual cities I don't wanna compare to. But as far as greater massive cities, do a lot of cities have the stuff we have? No, most of them don't, and things like that. So why are we continuing to go down that path when we can save, reallocate, outsource, whatever it may be, to hopefully improve our position financially? And that's a lot of what we're gonna try and do, and that's what we're gonna try and show you today, what it looks like. So we're gonna give you in bulk what this is, what it affects. We certainly can go department by department. I don't know how effective that'll be. I mean, we're gonna give you an end result. If you wanna talk about exactly every point we got there, fine, we can do that. But we're gonna be here most of the day. We just wanna get to the point of, here's what we look like, here's where our options are, what do you wanna do going forward? And we're not done. I mean, this is close, but there's still other funds we're trying to tap into to see if we can move something away from our general fund and into another funded source, and all these kind of things to manipulate whatever sources of money we have to be able to still accomplish things as best as we can, so.
We rely on your expertise on this, right, and the staff to give us the best advice you can, and I think, I don't think we need to get bogged down in the minutia of each department, but I think it'll be helpful for you to go through, you know, whether it was an equipment purchase that you decided we needed to defer, or whatever other cuts you and the staff decided to make compared to what we heard on the 20th.
Right.
So that we can, weigh the pros and cons of the major expenses and then hear what your ideas are. Because I think we need to not just, to prepare for the future, we need to not just be where we are, we need to be ahead of the game a little bit and keep our nest egg.
Okay.
Although that sounds like that's going to be painful. But,
Yeah.
we have to do what we can do to keep the city financially viable and healthy as best we can with the situation we find ourselves in, so.
And I think to that end also, we have to have foresight to know that another pandemic could come along, or another natural disaster could happen, or,
Or the legislature could come up with some other,
It's all the same thing, really.
yeah.
Natural disaster, pandemic, it's all the same, really.
Well, so it seems that in past years, like when I first came on the council, basically the city would present a budget and we would try to make it as lean as possible. And then we would say, okay, what's the tax levy to meet that budget?
Right.
And I feel like somehow I would say the tail is wagging the dog. We're basically told this is what your tax levy is, and you have to find the budget to meet that. That we're basically, something has changed so that we can't adjust our tax levy to match, the needs of our citizens, our budget.
That's, I guess, correct to some extent. As we go forward, and we'll give you some finance 101 lessons as we go, but, the 810 levy has been the same since 1975. We've talked about that. That's what you have. That's your core budget. That's it. $8.10 per thousand. Your goal is to grow and generate more. It takes a lot of growth to do much on an 810 to get there. Then we have a few other levies you can put in for benefits, pensions, our insurance. Our insurance went up $60,000 this year because of all the valuation increases. We can't just not pay that. So there's another hit to the levy that jumps that up a bit. So you have a levy for insurance, for benefits, for pensions, and there's some small ones, and then debt. So each year, debt was our big driver. We were living within our growth, so to speak.
Because of the debt.
And debt was what would drive the.
Basically, because we can levy for debt, that would enable us to do a lot of these things.
Right. Your major projects we would borrow for, you don't save and pay for those things. And
Right.
so often, in the past years, we'd have a budget, it was close to where we were the year prior, it was up a little, down a little, it was within the growth of what we had. And debt would be the decider, that we would have that separate conversation. That's what would change the levy. That's what would
Right.
make the tax rate go up, or whatever it was. And so now, we're in the same situation, it's just tighter. We have what we can put in for benefits, and we have what we can put in for pensions, but once it's in there, that's it. You can't add a car in there, it doesn't work like that. So you're either limited by the dollar amount, like the 810 levy, or what can go in it, like the benefits levy. And after that, there's nothing left. So once you get past the things you can put in these other levies, which are very specific, the 810 has to fund it all. That's it. Otherwise, you have to dip into fund balance, which we've done before, we've brought it back, things like that. But when you have a pandemic come through, and that fund balance starts to get thinner, or you have funds that you can't be allocated anymore, so that cushion's not there, then it starts to amplify where we were already heading, and so here we are. And as we said a year ago, we had to financially reset what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what we look like as a city, and that's what we're trying to do this year. It's nothing pleasant about it, it's just the way it's gonna have to be.
So in essence, basically, any of our capital projects are a separate conversation once we set the
I
budget.
think so. The small ones we've included in
Okay.
what we could do tax-wise, et cetera. And of course, there's road use tax and local option sales tax. And, we amplify those as well when we need to and use those for projects that they're eligible. Again, they have a limit what can go in those. So that's the balancing act that Val goes through and helps me get through anymore, is what can go in there, what can't go in there? What do we have left that we think we want to do? And finally got to the point we stuck it all out, because there isn't much left that we can do that we're not already doing, unless we start to really alter or change the way we're doing some of this. And we're trying to look for revenue sources. There doesn't seem to be a lot of them. There's a couple we'll talk about. Neither one are good, but it's just, this is what it looks like going forward. So, that's what I got.
One other quick question.
Sure.
So as 718 takes effect in the coming years, those levies that you mentioned, the benefits and debt and so on, are those in the group that have to go away with 718, or will those still be maintained?
No, ma'am, they will stay here. The levy that we fortunately only have one of out of the 20 that are gonna go away is for the Civic Center. It helps us maintain Civic Center. In fiscal 29, 28, 29, that'll be taken away, and you just have to absorb that into the 810 levy. Again, more money trying to go into that same fund that's not gonna really grow unless we grow, and that's gonna be about 80,000 in today's dollars that we'll just have taken away. Now, there's a number of cities that have multiple levies of those that will be disappearing, so they're gonna be in a similar situation, maybe a little worse than we are. So I guess if anything, we're fortunate, we didn't have a bunch of extra levies to have taken away, but it's still a levy that we're gonna have taken away. And that's where 718 kind of really gets to be a little harsher is in 29, because everybody goes then 810, and that's that, plus the other fringe levies you have.
So any of those, that you call them fringe levies, that we haven't used, are there any of those that we can make 1 or 2 years use out of?
No, you'd vote them in, you wouldn't gain
Okay.
that much. There's for like a museum or for, specific, very specific things, orchestra.
Okay.
And so those things don't cost a lot for us anyway, so to try and put that extra levy on, I don't know that it will benefit us. And then to just lose it a couple years later. I think we are where we are, and we know what we have, and we know what we can do. And in the end, if this continues down this path, I mean, it'd be all doom and gloom already. It's only 10:09. There's services, it's bodies, it's people that provide these things. And once we have to start thinning out people, then the services follow. And the public has to look at what do they want from a city, what do they not want. If you're okay with it, fine. If you're not, then you have to do something about it. And that's what we can do. I mean, and we can drain everything down to zero till the end and hope it's good and everybody likes it. But in the end, that's irresponsible too. You have to have funds set aside for who knows what's gonna happen. I mean, you got an example sitting right out there, flowing right by. It looks wonderful now. Doesn't look so good when it's 2 inches from the building. That's gonna happen again someday. Everybody knows that. It's just when. So if we don't have funding set aside, offset, it's no different what you do with the debt levy. You have a legal limit, and we took an 80% part of that to leave 20% for those very things that come around if they're eligible to be borrowed for. We're trying to do the same thing in this regular budget with your fund balances, to have something there just in case. And so to go down to zero or a little bit is not healthy and it's not wise, and that's what we're gonna try and avoid. To get that back to where we are today when we started, which sounds like a lot, $1 million, but it's barely 10% of what we're expending, and that's the hard one. Like I said, average is shooting for 25. And the logic behind that, again, we'll say it again, we don't receive the bulk of our revenue until September taxes. So you have 1/4 of the year, 25% of the year, you're wanting to have funds enough to maintain cash flow until you get to the point of your revenue coming in. Right now, we're not able to do that with 10%. I mean, it gets very close, it gets tight, it's a lot of timing, but there are times when it's probably getting to where it's gonna break a little, and then, we're riding through this, hoping to gain a little here, gain a little here. I'm kinda tired of hoping. I just wanna find another mechanism to hopefully build this better. I even say it, hopefully build it better. A mechanism to build it better so that we don't have to sit here and wonder and hope and rub our rabbit's feet or whatever we're doing. So that by this time next year, we still have a little money left over to do this all over again and go through the same problem, and then who knows what else has been put on the books to curb or box in what we're trying to do. So, if you enjoy this, we can do it every year. We're probably gonna have to. I just seem trying to find a way to get away from having this dire discussion every single year going forward. Because post-pandemic, this is kind of where it started to go in a hurry, and here we are. And I don't think it's gonna change much in the future, so that's kind of where we sit in a lot of this stuff.
Well, let's do it.
Where are we looking then?
Okay.
Are we-
So as I said, when we started working with Val, we thought about, we can just skim through this, take bits and pieces, or we can start to methodically figure out how do we attack this, how do we go through this. So one of the first things we sat down and talked about is, what are areas that can be outsourced? Areas that we can have a firm come in, do it for less money, or do it for equal, better service, whatever it is, what can we outsource? When you start looking at cities from across the state, largest cities, of course, have a lot bigger budgets than we do. The main areas you find are engineering services, legal services, and then sometimes you'll see a whole mixture of different things, whether it's parks, rec, what it may be. So that's where we started focusing and looking at what we can do to outsource those areas. With Bill Werger retiring, the legal piece, we did have it in the budget as a possibility. Do we bring someone back in? How do we do that? We've looked at now removing that position completely, having a other firm come in, which I assume it was like that before. They would do municipal infractions, they would do a lot of that. We already use Allers and Cooney out of Des Moines for a lot of our heavier things, from labor negotiations, development agreements, and so forth. We would continue to utilize them as much as we would need to and take that forward. And so we'd be looking for a firm to do the local day-to-day. And Bill's been great about helping to identify what that looks like. And I think that will save us it does save us a big chunk of money. And so, that office would still manage it. You'd have that staff taking care of that part of it. Connie Tolan has economic development going forward. We've looked at that. I'll support her as needed, but that is her division now. It's working very well. We hope to have some pleasant stuff to tell you in a little while. It's been working very, very well already, so. And so then engineering is another one. A lot of cities have it.
Stop on the legal.
Sure.
Where does that put us in terms of when we are at a council meeting and we need a legal opinion? Is this somebody that's going to be here on contract with us for every meeting, or?
I would not want someone here every meeting.
So,
I mean, if you have an issue that comes up, I'm certain it probably will not be so dire I can't get back to you the next day.
okay, because
If it is,
that's
I'll
kind
have
of
them here.
when we're dealing with something, there occasionally comes up where we want to get a legal opinion or a legal thought from Bill to give us kind of that feedback, and if it's a, day or two, I mean, council meetings are a couple weeks apart.
Right.
And so, before we can act on something, I don't want to get us into a situation where we're having to call special sessions in order to take an action on something that we weren't sure about.
Right.
That
And if you
would
look
be
at the agendas ahead of time, you identify those issues, which I hope you're all doing already. We'll have someone here if we think that's going to be a need, and that's part of what goes on as well. You'll have someone here for that very moment, that purpose, and you'll pay them on an hourly basis to do that. And so I don't think that's gonna be an issue. Again, that's why we review, even the staff, we review what we're taking to council before every meeting. We talk about what is and what isn't it. Is it gonna be an issue, is it not? And if there's some of those that, in Bill's absence going forward, that we think that this could get real hairy, let's have the attorney come in and be here for that moment. But as you know, there's not every single meeting we have that.
Right.
There's quite a few we don't, or something that we can get to and wait for another week or two, or find out the next day, or things of that nature. So absolutely, that'll have to be covered.
And my other concern with that outsourcing of it is, would that be at Ehlers and Cooney, we've got that do specific things for us, that we have the same people doing it.
Right.
Pretty much. Would this be outsourced, that we would have a single person that would be dedicated to us, or would it be a law firm that would have whoever's available coming in?
Most of what you see now is you'll have a firm, but you'll have one person from that firm. Not everybody does municipal law, and there's only some that do and don't. Again, most of this I've gotten from talking to Bill. You have firms that do it, some that don't, individuals that will, some that won't, and so you find that person or persons, or maybe two, that actually have that field, do that work. And that's
They'll
who
be
we have
familiar
here.
with
Yes.
Waverly, with city issues.
City law in general, because you don't just find an attorney and say, hey, you're gonna do city work here, you want somebody that actually does that
Right,
city work.
right.
And there are firms that do this, there's a couple for sure, even Cedar Rapids in this area, they're so overwhelmed with cities that are doing this now, have gone to this, that they're not hiring anymore, they're not taking on more clients, and so this is not some trail we're blazing here. It's been done commonly for a long time, we're fortunate we didn't have that, but now we do, so it's not uncommon. At all, and they're actually, like I said, firms that have divisions that work with just municipal law, because there's such a need for it right now. So I don't know if we'll get one of
Well,
those
and
firms, but
It's a step. Prior to Bill, we had Jerry, and he was full-time
yes,
as law. And then Bill came in and we looked and we could restructure it to be basically half and half. So we're stepping back again. We've gradually pulled back on that from a full-time just law, city attorney, to now outsourcing. And then my biggest concern is just that we have somebody that's consistent, that would know the issues and stuff that we're dealing with.
Okay.
So I suppose,
understand it.
so my question about this is, so we are outsourcing this as a way to kind of save costs. Under what situation does this fail to be a cost-saving measure? I mean, if we have suddenly, the city is embroiled in a lawsuit, or, that's kind of my question, under what circumstances is this not a cost savings? I mean, what are the assumptions that we're making that are telling us that this is cost savings, as opposed to, now we're going to be spending twice as much for someone who's not on staff to answer the same questions?
I don't know that there'll be a situation, it's not a cost savings. Because it's just like, when you look at, other things we don't do this 24/7. You're gonna have an option here and there, but not paying for every single hour of the day, just in case. And that's what we are now,
Okay.
that legal advice. You will need them and do them as needed. We've had lawsuits,
Okay.
there's been a whole bunch of them. We don't do them internally in-house. Most of the time, there's counsel outside that are doing it already.
So the cost
Through
savings,
ICAP or through another firm, so we're already doing that now.
the cost savings isn't coming from a risk as much as it is from, I would say, a lower level of service, in the sense that we can't go down the hall to get our questions answered. We need to get someone on the telephone, send an email.
Right.
Instead of waiting 5 minutes for an answer, we may be waiting a day for an answer.
Correct.
And let me just add here that the area of municipal law is very specific. I mean, there are a lot of things in there. It's not a general practice kind of thing where you have the local attorney down the street. It's become so complex that you really need to have a specialist that understands what all of these things are. We were fortunate to have Bill here with us working on that. That's not a situation that is probably viable for the future. You need to have somebody who specializes in that area, just to avoid the kinds of things, Brian, that you were talking about lawsuits down the road, not making mistakes on things. I feel much, much more comfortable. But, ignoring any kind of budgetary issues, I feel much, much more comfortable in having someone who is a specialist in the area of municipal law that we're working with on legal issues, than just simply having somebody who has an office here and we can run down the hall and ask him questions. Because it's really easy to screw things up. And it's just not something that I would feel comfortable replacing with another attorney that we hire, just to have an attorney here. And there are a shortage of attorneys too, so it'd be difficult to get somebody. So I think it's a wise move, whether we do it for budget reasons or not. I mean, it's just coincidentally has a positive effect, not only on us being able to have adequate legal advice, but also is probably going to end up in significant cost savings, which is a bonus.
First time I've heard somebody say we have a shortage of attorneys.
Just the right types of attorneys.
Yeah. There is actually a shortage of attorneys.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, move forward. Then the other area we looked at was engineering, which again, if you look at a number of cities, they have a firm, a consultant that comes in as needed. It's not a full-time staff sitting there, and they will do the work that we're needing done. They have access to structural engineers, architects, whatever you may need at any point in time. And so that's another area where I think we can benefit, we can save money, we can have just as good a service. It's just not instantly as we would have. Same thing with legal that we're looking at. And so that's what we're looking at. So while that entire division is being looked at, we still need inspection services for project. We still need some of those duties that we're going to have to either reset the individuals that are doing it, which is something we're looking into as well right now. We talked about the first meeting, we want to expand our usage of GIS. Paid a lot of money to get that done. We're starting to get use of more use of it, different divisions, but we need a lot more than that to justify what we're kind of doing with it. And then code enforcement, I've talked to Paige quite a bit. I don't want us to be just a reactionary city in that either, because there's a lot of areas we can actually advance and make us look a little better. instead of waiting for complaints to come in. So we want to be a little more, I don't want to say aggressive, but a little more proactive, thank you, in how we address code enforcement as well. So I'd rather shift some of that work into just inspections, but also GIS, project management, there'll be some, but more the code enforcement as well to assist, because having a single person doing code enforcement as well as zoning, that's a lot. And that's why you do see a lot of things we just can't get to in time, or things we've not done as well as we'd like to. And that's kind of another reason we're trying to move forward by bringing other firms in that have more resources than what we can do with an individual or two. So that's the other area that we were looking at.
So, yeah, the engineering, the thing that struck me on that was the inspections of projects.
Yeah.
Make sure that they're being done,
We still have to find a way to do that, yeah.
just to make sure that they're meeting, and we don't have a hodgepodge of different types of situations around, and we end up with, we had a decade ago or so with Centennial Oaks and Prairie Links, where we
Yeah.
had to go back in, and after we had accepted it, now we had to go back in and fix problems with it that were not.
Right.
And so that's my concern, is that we have a consistent, looking from the city standpoint, to say that somebody in the city is saying this matches with everything else we're doing, and we're not having to piecemeal this to that, and we have gaps that suddenly occur because some work was not quite the same level as another.
And that's the thing, what you're talking about is with the same structure we have today. With the same individuals, same everything. So that happened then. So if we're moving on to that, maybe we won't have that happen. I don't really know, I can't predict, but that's the role we're trying to get into, is to see what we can and can't do with this.
I mean, because we already contract out for bridge inspections and
For everything.
most of those things, and any kind of design work is all pretty much out of house. So it's that secondary look, not have the contractor to say, yeah, we did it right, but for
Right.
somebody from us to say, we agree.
Well, and the firms we'll look at is, there's a handful we've already talked to a little bit, just in case this was going forward, is you don't want somebody watching themselves. What's the point in that?
Right.
So it'd be firms that we don't currently utilize in a lot of our project work or things of that nature. Again, we're piecing all this together yet, we're still working out the menudo of this, but part of it was, until we figured out where you wanted to go, we really couldn't go much further and waste our time and others' time and what that would look like. So that's kind of where we're at today, is trying to figure out what do you want to do going forward, then we'll get things in place to accomplish what you want done and alleviate your concerns, we hope, as we go forward and do that. And that's our goal, so.
I suppose my biggest concern is I don't think we're gonna be able to come up with an answer for how much this will save us, because we don't know how much consulting we're going to need. I mean, we have some sense of the projects that we're doing and the consulting we're doing now, and what additional consulting are we going to need, and what's the actual cost savings. And that's,
Right.
I mean, and again, I don't think we can know that until we've done it, until we've made the change and then seen how things shake out. I mean, how often are we going to our consulting engineers for questions?
Right. It depends on what they cover, what they don't, the rates, all that stuff is all in the mix.
Well, I mean, it's a question of it's a matter of what questions we have.
Right.
I mean, if we have questions, we need them answered, and if we go to our usual friend and they can't answer them, well, then we're gonna have to go to somebody else.
Yeah,
Some
you're right.
some of that will be able to be built in, especially if it's our major capital type projects, that can be built into the bonding in terms of.
All right.
Well, we already hire, like I said, we already hire engineering firms to do a lot of this for most projects we have. We have companies coming in. We're not doing this in-house, almost any of it. We do the administration part of it and some of the inspection work, but that can all be factored into that as well. So
Well, I think.
it's hard
I
to
mean,
gauge that.
Something Tim said, I think it's important. So if we are outsourcing our engineering to our capital projects, does that mean that can now be funded out of debt service as opposed to out of the general fund?
A lot of it is now.
Yeah, a lot of it
It is
already.
now already,
And
so-
some
You
of
look
it
at the
is-
project,
So
we're-
much is assigned to this.
Okay.
We're borrowing for engineering, we're borrowing for the cost of construction, we're borrowing for internal inspection, we're borrowing for, it's all done now, all of it, already per project. Ours is a day-to-day operation, if we have questions or issues, which there's not that much of it that we have. The team we have in place, I mean, it's been a good, solid group, and we work through a lot of things week to week, and overall, it's, you know, you're talking an hour or so here and there, and so that's why we're trying to look at what does that look like? How much does that cost? We will factor in a piece of funding to offset that cost, and we've already done that, and then it's just a matter of what the extra is. And that's what we're hoping to trim off and be able to save.
Yeah, I think it's about whether the productivity is there, right? And the amount of work is there to justify a department when you already outsource a lot of it. And it sounds like you're thinking of reallocating some of those team members to different duties
Like we're gonna
where
have to.
they're needed,
Like
like
we're gonna
code
have to.
enforcement, et cetera.
Is the point of you said being more proactive with code enforcement, is that to be a revenue generator?
No, absolutely not.
No.
It's to have people not have to look at the same house next door with junk all over it. It takes us 6 months to get it cleaned up, because we had to wait till somebody complained. We do a little bit, and we sit and wait. Somebody complains again, we do a little bit, sits and waits. Or we have to wait for somebody to go by and see somebody's yard's 12 inches tall. Maybe they'll call it in, maybe they won't, and then somebody calls in furious, how can that happen? It's to try and find a way to get ahead of that before it becomes a foot-tall yard. We do have them, believe it or not. Or there's a bunch of junk in the front yard, the backyard, every yard. We want to try to get to those properties first, so that we don't having people walk through, drive through, come to this beautiful community and say, oh my God, it's happening over here.
Yeah.
We want to get ahead of some of that. We don't want to just be complaint-driven, because I think by that point in time, it's really bad, because a lot of people are very Iowa nice, and that's a good thing, but you don't want to call on your neighbor, you don't want to call unless it's cats. Then we're going to be, we're not getting into cats in this, but cats are going to get a call. A lot of this rest of stuff, you don't want to do that. People don't want to do that, and I understand that, but the fact is, we're not going to be able to address it unless we're out there also having a little bit of a look. A lot of the individuals we deal with in some of the departments are out there all the time. They're seeing it too. Report it back, let's get our paperwork going, and let's actually try to address some of this going forward. We may be looking at utilizing our recycling individuals or people that run our garbage routes. They see every single property in the entire city, every single week. Is there times a year where we have them take a pen and paper, jot down an address? They see it, they know what's going on. We don't utilize that. And if we're gonna utilize that, we're gonna need more staffing to start cranking out some of the issues and notices, and that's kind of what we're thinking too. So it's not proactive to be out and go get people. It's just trying to alleviate a neighbor having to call in another neighbor that they don't want to because there's issues that we're not addressing. Because it all comes back to us not doing our job. That's what we're told, and in a sense, that's probably true. We can't just sit and hope that somebody turns in everything that we need out there. We don't want this to become some secret hotline. But we do know there's issues, and we hear about it.
I would say, we basically don't want to be paying people to sit around waiting for a phone call.
Right.
We want to be paying people to be going out and looking what needs to be done.
And preventing the phone calls from coming. That's the goal, that's the proactive nature of that, so that is correct.
Let me just say a couple words back, we were discussing earlier about the engineering division. I find that to be a little bit more problematic, outsourcing that, mainly because I don't really understand what the individuals there do. And I'm very, very comfortable with outsourcing the legal part of it because I understand what they do. And I fully support that. I'm not necessarily opposed to outsourcing the engineering. I'm just not as comfortable with that because I don't really know how it would work. So when you are looking through that, I guess if we're doing it only as a budget item, I would probably be opposed to doing that. If it's also something that we can do to make things go more smoothly and streamline our processes and all of that, we're looking forward in future years of how things might operate, and we can guarantee that it will work smoothly, that we have the services there when we need them, and that there'll be adequate services, then I think we go forward with it. But I am not as comfortable with that as I am with outsourcing the legal part.
I understand that.
Well,
I think it's a bit of both.
I think my understanding is there are parts of engineering that we can outsource and parts that we can't. And in some sense, we're going to take the parts that we can't outsource and move them into a different division and the things that we can outsource, we will. That's, I
I think
mean,
it's a fair statement, yes. There are certain things we still need to have, we're gonna allocate it differently, create a different job, different structure, so we're getting what we need from that. And then what we can, we will outsource, like I said. That's the only way we can do it. And again, this is what we're bringing forward, because this is what we're seeing most places anymore. A lot of cities our size, some have internal engineering, some don't. Smaller, same thing. I know 2 of my peers have lost their engineers to the DOT, because they paid more. They don't know if they can find another one. They'll be going the same route, exact same route, and a lot of them already do, so.
It's also a shortage of engineers,
That's what it seems like.
a shortage of everyone.
A lot that want to work in municipal cities, so it seems like that.
Public sector,
The public sector.
private, yeah.
One question that comes to mind is, in the event of a natural disaster, let's say, how will that work? I mean, do we need an engineer here pronto when something like 2008 happens? Or are the functions that we need in a crisis situation like that absorbable by the other departments?
Well, I think when you look at natural disasters coming in, emergency management is going to be your go-to. Well, we have internal people as well. It'll start at the emergency management structure, and then it goes down. You have law enforcement, we have public works. You have a lot of the big divisions that are covered now. Because for a while, we had combined engineering public works. Now we have that separated, and we do have strong public works that can handle a lot of that issue. Whether you're talking streets, water flow, et cetera, they have that ability too now. So we don't look the same as we did even today as we did in 2008. But it would start, in my opinion, with emergency management ripped down, and that's why we have chief, we have, Justin, we have people in place for a lot of that. But at the end, nothing's gonna be perfect. It's not gonna be flawless. It's not flawless now, it's certainly not perfect now. So we're trying to just improve as we can going forward and try and make an impact, both financially and in service, and in duties that we're not covering as much as we'd like to. And that's our ultimate goal. I can't promise it won't be problems. It's not as if we have perfection now, we're gonna ruin it. We're gonna try and make it better going forward. That's the best we can do with this.
I think it's important for the public to understand that we're not making, whatever decisions we make in this budget season, we're not just making them because we want to cut costs now, we're also having foresight to make sure that we're not painting ourselves into a corner when something unexpected happens.
But I think it's all related though, honestly, Julie. I mean, the budget cuts we're making now are so we don't make budget cuts later.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is driven by the budget and what we're doing. We may have been thinking about it before, but now the choice isn't really there. We have to move forward with some significant changes. Or as I said to start with, we're gonna be doing this every single year. We're trying to get ahead of the curve by making these decisions so we can hopefully try and prosper going forward. If it doesn't work, we can always go back. That's the key. None of this is set in stone to where, oh, we're done, can't do it again. You can bring someone back, you can hire again, you can. It's just, I think this is the route that we can go to see how this is gonna go for us, because doing what we're doing now is not working in some areas, and so we continue to keep doing it because we don't want to change, then we're gonna keep doing this every single year. And that's the pitch of everything we're talking about in these harder decisions. Continue to do the same thing is what got us in this situation in the first place. We don't want to impact staff. I get it. It's horrible. Not a great day yesterday, I'll tell you right now. Not something I enjoyed at all. We had to do the job, and that's what it is. And our job today is to try and figure out a better way to move the city forward. Otherwise, we're doing this every single year. Every 12 months, we're going through the same agonizing project. Possibly some years are much worse, some are a little better. I want to control more of what's happening with us financially, the best we can, until the state says, nope, taking this away.
Don't do that.
And I just don't want to keep beating our head in the wall every year thinking, oh, if we just would have done this, oh, if we'd have done that 2 years ago. We've already had so many discussions like that. I think Val's gonna disown me and move. It's been terrible today. Because we've talked and talked, could we have done something different? Would it have changed? And most of the time, it wouldn't have, unless we did what we're doing now. And that's the ripple effect going forward. You know, we talked early on, so we can cut equipment. That's great till it breaks and you need it. Now you're paying for it at somebody else's cost and what they need on the spot, emergency type situations. It costs a lot more. You saw it in COVID. If you really wanted a piece of equipment, you're paying triple for it because somebody else wants it too, and it was a bidding war. You're gonna have those situations in equipment, so fine, we can push off equipment, you're gonna need it someday, it doesn't fix your issue. When you're looking at trying to balance this out going forward, you're looking for revenue sources that you can move into, and there aren't many left anymore, because every time we find one, the secret gets out, the state closes the loophole, and that's it, that's gone, so we gotta look for another one. Or you're looking at what continues to drive operational increases, and that is unfortunately staffing. And if you don't reorganize or retool some of your staffing off and on to try and be more efficient and be better, you know, everybody feels better about it until it comes to these moments every single year. And now we're struggling, what do you do? And we look at the faces, we think, oh, this person here. So the hardest thing for me to do, and I credit both HR and Val, is you have to look at the position, not the person. And that's been the most difficult thing this year to do, is to try and separate that out, because that's not easy in a smaller community like this. But that's what we've done, and that's what we're presenting, trying to go forward with, is making changes that will hopefully impact us positively going forward, instead of battering down the hatches and hoping that it gets better next year. We've done that for years, and it's not getting better. In fact, you know what's gonna get worse. You've seen what's out there in Des Moines. It's not gonna get better. So ducking down behind and hoping is not helping us. So if we don't start making radical decisions, I hate to say the word radical, progressive decisions, this is not gonna get any better. And so we have not spent an hour or two on this. We've spent an hour every 2 hours doing this for weeks, and it's not been pleasant, it's not been fun. It's not easy. You're gonna see a lot of the complications of what we ran into. So we'll talk about one of them now. You get rid of a body, let's say, you release an individual, only 2/3 of it affect this budget. The other third goes to another fund because of how it's set up that doesn't help us. So even the bang for the buck you're getting by eliminating a person, or it's not the same as you would think it was. Maybe 2/3 of that cost goes here. Then we have to factor in the enterprise funds as we transfer bits to water, sewer, solid waste. So the impact is not as significant as it looks like it would be on paper, because it just doesn't work that way. And that's been the challenge we face as well. I mean, you go through all this work, spent 4 hours one day going through this entire budget tip to tip to cut $250,000 out of it. And half of it was one item. So not very productive, but that's what we've had to do to get to the point you're gonna see here. We've nickel and dimed this thing down. We've taken out stuff I don't think we can take out, but we did. To try and see how far we could get this so that we don't have to continue to go through this every single year we get down here. And we have things we have to do. We have projects we have to do. We have equipment that's falling apart, some of it, because we've pushed it off for multiple years because you couldn't get it in COVID. Now we can, still 2 years out. That's something we'll talk about. An ambulance, we probably need to order it now because it won't be here for 2 years. So it won't be in the fiscal year we're even building now. It'll be in fiscal '26 if we order it now. We're still dealing with that. We have stuff coming in from 2 years ago. Well, that hits our reserves too. That money's long gone. I mean, we put it in, but it was gone. And now we're having to deal with that. And so all this stuff has become a little more complicated to work forward. So I appreciate the questions, but we're just trying to hammer through this and let you get a total package of what we're looking at. And we can answer anything at that point, but we got a lot to cover yet. So if we can, I'd like to move forward and try and figure the rest of this out, so. Okay, vegetation management was the next division that we looked at. While you can't necessarily outsource that, that division has only been around a certain number of years. It's a recent addition we put in. I think what happened there was very good. We were doing good work, but it's one that we can pull back. Street department used to do it before, they can do it again. We have capacity to take that back on. Again, you look at areas, specialized areas like this, not many cities have that specialized an area for tree trimming, pruning, detention basin work. It was a good idea, it just financially, it's not viable right now, is what we're looking at, as we try to impact areas that most of the public will see. And that's the other thing we try to look at, is what is gonna be least impactful to the public, what will be most beneficial to maintain, what can we eliminate and absorb and try to be almost as good as what we have. And vegetation management was one of them. So that is one that we were removing as well. And back to that difficulty part, but then there's still the equipment, there's still the maintenance on the equipment, the fuel for the equipment. So you take that out, you still don't really take it out. That stuff still exists, has to go somewhere. So it isn't the impact you'd want it to be necessarily, but it still was substantial for us to move forward. And then that reallocation of equipment prevents purchasing of newer equipment in other areas. So the ripple effect was probably as productive as the actual removal of the department itself. So that is another one that we're looking at undoing, taking away, reverting back to where we were probably 4 or 5 years ago, I guess, about where it was when it started.
Yeah, I mean, I remember some of the benefits of the vegetation management department was there were certain grants that we could apply for by virtue of having that department. There was a bunch of equipment that we were able to get partially funded by virtue of having that department. We're gonna lose that, but, I mean, I think we saw a huge impact initially from the grants that we were getting, but I haven't seen as much of those grants coming in lately, just because, I mean, we had all this pent-up need that a vegetation management, we were able to get funded, kind of, that's run its course. And now, you know, we're not as competitive for those grants because we've gotten a lot of those grants recently.
Right.
This one, you know,
I think it was 11,000 was all for this next year. The
Yeah.
grant was
yeah,
11,000.
but,
I
I mean,
still think we can get that through parks.
16,000.
I don't think we lose it, it's for the equipment, I don't think we lose that. We had specified specific equipment for that, if we still wanna go out for that, and I think the piece we're talking about is it's the cedar.
Cedar thing.
The,
I mean, do you
uh,
have to have a vegetation management department to apply for those grants or not? Can it be part of
Garrett?
another department?
I don't wanna misspeak on that, I'll let Garrett answer that, Garrett or Paul are here for
I'm
that.
sorry, what was that, Ann?
Do you have to have a vegetation management department to apply for those grants, or can you do it in the, you know, larger grounds or leisure services?
I believe for the Living Roadway Trust Fund grant, which is something that we do each year, yes, we need to have a vegetation management division. This year, we were looking at the hydro cedar. And I mean, we've gotten something, you know, each year that we've had it. But, you know, other than that, there are other grants that aren't necessarily vegetation management.
Exclusive?
Thank you, yes. A lot of our trees grants, the Trees Please, the Trees for Kids, those types of things, I believe that we will still be eligible to get those. It was just that they were, the Vegetation Management Division were the ones who wrote that up.
Gotcha.
Is there much savings here, though? Because most of that stuff is still going to have to be done. I mean, the tree trimming and the burning off of areas and mowing and all of that, I mean.
We were doing it before we had this division.
Right.
Streets.
Streets was doing a lot of it.
Depends
Right.
on whether Streets has time to do it, I guess.
Yeah.
Justin would be the person to tell us that.
But if you're looking at budget cuts, how eliminating that, is that going to reduce the budget?
I can answer that for you.
Okay.
As we look at this, yes, the equipment is there. The operators we will need are still there. We still have the guys in the streets that did this before. One of the things we were trying to do, and we mentioned it when we were talking earlier, is as we look to reclassify some places, some positions, whether it be engineering or whatever it may be, this is another one where our street department, especially with the snow, et cetera, somebody's still gonna have to do some of that work. Road use tax can take a little bit of that hit. They were already paying almost $70,000 into vegetation management. If that isn't paid in, that one personnel, we're hoping to work through that too, could potentially go to streets. We still keep an arborist, and we still have another individual who will primarily focus on that area. But you'd have 6 people doing it instead of 2 when the time comes. It just won't be an all year round event. And again, we're still trying to work through what that looks like. But that is a different funding source. And it's what we were talking about earlier. Can we find
Okay.
different funding sources that are not gonna hit our general fund, our property tax, but still allow us to continue to do those services?
All right.
So our goal would be, of the 2 individuals in that department, are we able to open up a position in streets? And we're working with Justin on that now. What will the road use tax fund take? But you pull back that 70,000, that's a pretty good chunk of what a body will cost. Can we flex the rest, and then we still have a person brought in that's doing that specifically, as I said, keep our arborist. We maintain a good piece of it. So we're eliminating from our general fund tax into a different fund potentially, but we're not losing our complete division, so to speak.
Gotcha.
We're reallocating.
are we effectively moving these bodies from leisure services and vegetation management into public works?
One would possibly do that. It would become streets, which, I mean, you look at what they're doing now, they can use an additional body as well.
So right now we have 2 bodies in vegetation management,
Correct.
so we're basically reducing it to 1 body in public works.
Correct. That's a goal we're trying to do and get the numbers to tie out for it, but it looks like it's possible.
And then because we're in public works, there's a little more flexibility of where we can pull in a lot of people when we have a high need, as opposed to just having someone year-round trying to keep up.
Right,
And
you look at
fund
the
it.
weather in the last month or so, we could have been trimming the entire time with a half dozen people instead of trying to do it with 2, which again, the work they did is not questioned. The individuals doing the work was not questioned. This is positions and.
Do we
numbers.
have the equipment for that, though?
We do.
Okay.
We were actually having duplicate equipment because it was tough to borrow, things of that nature. You won't have that now. And we won't have to purchase additional equipment. So what we already have is adequate to do what we were doing. It's just now different personnel will be using it. Because forever before this, streets are the group that did tree trimming. They shut down an entire street. They can do that. There's how many of them. You clear what you need to do, clean it up, you move on to another street. Unfortunately, with 2 individuals, it's hard to shut a whole street down. It'll take a very long time to do that same amount of work. Piece by piece, coned out around areas and that. And again, I'm speaking a little bit out of class. I don't know if Paul or Garrett want to add to that, but that's kind of like what we're trying to do again, is find another funding source that makes sense. Streets always has need for additional bodies as well. You look at the winter issue we had this year, we couldn't find enough personnel. We were burning them out. We were not able to go 24, 30 hours straight, back-to-back storms, clean up, all that. More people would have been better. And that's the other part of what we're trying to talk about, staff going forward, is we're very siloed in a lot of what we do. If we can break that apart and start to really assist across divisions, across departments, I think we need to be better about that. And I think that's gonna be a goal. What we try to do is share equipment more often, share vehicles more often. You know, do I need 9 pickups when 6 will do? Well, let's just get 6. Because it's in different divisions. Let's try to allocate a little more internally, and cooperate a little more so we can knock out more snow with as many people that we can pull in. Even if they're in a different division, if they can run the equipment, let's get that done. And that's stuff we've not done as much of, that I think we wanna push and have a little better understanding of how that'll work going forward. So, while this is budgetary we're talking about, the structure overall and the culture, what we're trying to change is also part of this. And we're hoping this will make it better, go forward, more cooperative. In the end, we're just better as a whole. Using that word hope a lot, but I guess it's all we have right now, so I can't use money because that's not here. Okay, we had a couple new positions we wanted to add, which we knew that was gonna be a tough one, so we were looking to pull in a 3rd mechanic. 2 individuals doing that work now, both will be able to retire soon. We don't know when, it's not my business when they want to retire, but you don't just pick up how many 100 pieces of equipment and learn it and know it in a matter of weeks, with the emission issues and some of the stuff they work on. Some point, we're gonna have to get somebody here to start learning some of this to take that over, but this is probably not the year for that. So we have removed that 3rd mechanic. Parks was looking for another position to split half and half with vegetation management and parks. We've had to remove that. We had a couple interns throughout the city. We're probably gonna go away from that at this point in time. Oh my gosh, what else do we have? Cemetery was one we're also looking at. Do we need a full-time individual there? And that's something where we're gonna work forward with Paul and Garrett and just kind of see what does that job look like as well. Is it full-time? Is it less hours as needed? Is it part-time? Is it there at all? We're not real sure. Right now, we have it at half, just as a placeholder, see what that does look like, depending on what these guys are gonna tell us. And again, as we reduce individuals, possibly that puts work other places, and we wanna make sure we're careful not to start losing that work as well by overwhelming what we do have left. And so, there's a lot of places that'll do that. It's pile on, you just have to make it work. At some point you can't, there's only some time in the day. It is gonna affect services. So that's what we're gonna have to figure out there. I think from a personnel standpoint, those are the bulk of the changes that we have. I'm trying to think, was there anything else, Val? Is that the core of it? I think it was. So that's what we have from a personnel standpoint. Good Lord. So any questions on any of that before we get into the non-personnel related reductions?
So, in the library, we have both accounting and computer services. Is that any kind of a duplication of effort?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, so library has, what, an administrative assistant bookkeeper, someone who does like the library accounting.
Right.
But we also have accounting here at City Hall.
Well, that position there is almost more of a coordinator, because it's not just books they're doing, they're also doing a little purchasing, a little everything. I think that's fair, Sarah. It's not just crunching books.
Okay.
It's just, the title is misleading. They're doing a bit more than that. It's more of what we would have an office coordinator in our area.
And we also have someone who's doing IT services there.
We do.
Is that at all a duplication of IT that's here at City Hall?
Currently, our IT contract is not covering the library because they have their own individual. And again, we'll address that now. Library's here as well. I've asked Sarah to look at $150,000 in cuts and removals in the library.
Okay.
I'm more than willing to sit down, help them work through that, but that's what we're looking at. Now,
Okay.
what they determine is the best way to do that will be up to the library
Yeah.
board itself. That's their
Okay.
direction under the code.
Okay.
We simply cannot dictate, point, we can recommend, but that is not for us to decide.
Sure.
That is for them to decide.
Okay.
And so that is what we've allocated and asked them to try and work through to figure out how to accomplish that.
Okay, so because they're more of a separate entity, we're just kind of giving them a dollar amount and saying, you figure out how to cut this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I mean,
That's all we can do. We're not gonna, we can't get in the middle of that. That is,
But
They're
I mean, I
right.
suppose, these are areas where there is a potential for cost savings if we could, combine services across
Sure.
city departments, but,
in theory, that's correct. Yes, sir.
okay.
So, any other personnel related questions? Okay, we'll pop through everything else then. Equipment was quite a bit as well. As we went through that project, we were looking at a lot of trucks, we were looking at a lot of equipment. We have pulled back chunks of that. There was a truck to be replaced in engineering. We are not going to replace it at this point in time. The cemetery was looking for a 1-ton truck with a plow and sander. That was well over 100,000. We're probably gonna pull that back, try and find a different way to get those services accomplished, whether it be through partnership with streets or somewhere to get that done. There is a truck there currently. It's getting old, but we're gonna try and push that forward for another year or so. The playground updates, that was a hard one. Having gone out there and seen all that, there was a chunk of money in there. We took half, because I don't wanna eliminate all of that, because that is a safety issue as well, if we don't start looking and addressing some of those pieces out there. And so our goal is to hopefully leave a portion of that to still try to impact playgrounds, pieces of equipment that are starting to either fail or wear out. I know the guys did a great job before talking about, it doesn't exist anymore, some of this, but something that can replace it does. And so our goal will be to try and get as much as we can for the money that's in there. And then year after year, try and continue to replace as we can go. But we didn't want to take the entire amount because, part of this, we still have to function, we still have to do things that make sense, we still have to maintain items, but it was a reduction that we put in for you to consider. Same thing with the power upgrade in the parks. I know we had 10,000 there, we're gonna take half. We'd like to at least try and do some. Maybe it's not both parks, maybe we can get one done for that. Again, we try to piecemeal us out a little bit, but still make progress going forward. And then one of the weirder ones, we had to ask about this. So with the golf course, we have a master charge processing fee, because as we process, that there is a charge in all of these. Currently, we've been trying to figure out a way that's more efficient to pass that through, to eliminate that. And so we're trying to work with T-SNAP right now to see what they can do for that. That contract's up in October. If we're not able to get somewhere with them, we may go to a different vendor that will be able to get some of that accomplished. So we reduced that by half as well, with the hopes that we will be able to find something in the first 6 months of the year to eliminate the other piece of that, to the other half.
What is this again? You said master?
So whenever you use a credit card, there's a
Oh,
fee attached
MasterCard
to
fees,
it.
okay.
And so we're trying to find a way to eliminate that.
Okay.
So that we're either absorbing it
Passing it on,
somehow,
right.
passing it on, somewhat how we're doing that.
Okay.
And that's part of what we reduced there too. And then one of the, couple things we had at the golf course, and again, it's just was a matter of priorities. We were gonna line hole number 2. We're gonna try and find that funding somewhere else. If we can't, we'll simply have to go another year without being able to line that. I know it's important to the group out there and it is an amenity, but we also have to be realistic about what we're gonna be able to do. And then the sweeper was the other part we wanted to purchase. Again, it's $8,000. We'll see if there's a different funding source possibly for it. Otherwise, we'll keep scooping and picking up by hand the little plugs that, it's just part of the deal. So, that has been reduced. Planning zoning, the update on the code, we know we need to get it done. It's a significant chunk of money, it's $60,000. We're gonna try and pull that for now, see if we can internally find a better way to do it. Trying from a group standpoint, take it out piece by piece, maybe we'll have a firm that does this review it instead of actually create it for us and see what that would look like instead. So try and find a different allocation to be able to accomplish the same thing. Same thing with the city codification. I wanna find a way to fund that, because we need to get that done. We probably have a lot of areas out there that are inconsistent throughout the entire code. I don't know when's the last time we did codification, Carla?
I think it was in '86.
Okay, 86. We're gonna have to find a way to probably fund that somewhere, because, yeah, there could be stuff we're referencing that doesn't exist, there could be all kinds of things, because it does happen, you can't check
8 tracks?
50, no. I think we were on cassettes by then, I don't think it was 8 tracks. But for this time being, we're taking it from the general fund, we're gonna try it again, look at a different funding source potentially. 86, holy cow, okay. The improvements we want to do in Civic Center, we are gonna try and find a place to fund that from. The flooring, we really probably need to do that at a minimum, but the painting, the walls, you see the nice glue lines, if you look hard enough, it's very appealing here. And then the columns outside, you can already see more pieces have chipped off in the concrete. I don't even know what the solution to that is. We've been trying to find people that can assist in what that looks like. It's very difficult apparently to redo those pieces of stone. I'm not even sure what kind of material that is. It's not like it's granite or anything. I don't know. But it's peeling off. It looks pretty tough. But again, it's cosmetic, it's not structural, so we will try to see if that's possible to get that figured out, but that was removed out of here. The financial system, we will try to fund as well. I don't want Val to be entering this by hand anymore, nor do I want to have to not have reports we'd like to get, simple things we want to do. With the current financial system, it simply does not have that ability. And if it does, the amount of work it takes to get the finished product is simply not worth trying. It is very cumbersome and it's just not something that's gonna benefit us. So we're gonna try and fund that from a different source if possible. Hoping there's a lot of sources somewhere else, but it's what we can do to make sense, because again, small projects or personnel, this was all taken first before we got into people, because, I mean, come on, we're not gonna replace concrete versus staff, but yet there's a lot of that in here as well. So the fire station, that's another one, I gotta talk to Bryce. I don't know if there's a grant or if their association can help with that. That was some of the tuck pointing, a little bit of the window sealing. We're gonna try and look at what that could be. So again, some of these may have to come back in if we can't allocate additional funds for them, but we're still wanting to try and do that versus taxing for it. And these are things that are not the end of the world. They're probably gonna have to be done at some point in time, you know, we push them off so far. And so that's what we're looking at. And then the newsletter, I was kinda excited about that, but it's $20,000 for the year. And if we can fund it, great. If we can't, we'll survive another year. I just think it was a good effort to get something like that to the public for information. So we'll look for some, I have an idea or two on that. It's just, again, we gotta check code, make sure it's legitimate. Can we even do that? So,
Whose part of the budget was that under? Was that under city clerk?
the city clerk, yes, sir.
Okay.
We talked about the library and appreciate what they're gonna try and do there. And then we got a fun one. It's probably the last one I'll bring up then, before we talk about kind of where we're sitting. So this is one that we're gonna have to probably chat about. But we've talked about it. I think it's legitimate to at least look at, do we open the pool or not this year? Going forward as we're trying to create and do another pool. You've seen the photos. We've showed you the amount of caulk in this thing is starting to outnumber some of the grooves. It's $150,000 savings by not opening the pool and not doing the painting, which is required if we open the pool. That's what we're facing. We're working with a firm now. We were talking to a couple different individual firms. We've got one we think we're gonna try and get going forward, get a proposal to you. That funding is sitting in this year to try and get our renderings done so we know what the plan will look like. The clubhouse, the other part of this from a referendum standpoint, we've got that identified. I'll be bringing that to you the 19th. So we can at least figure out what does it look like, what's it cost, what are we gonna do? Which without that, there's no going forward at all. So with the pool, our goal is to have that vote in November, have something out there. We'll have a committee for the first, I don't know, half of this year of individuals throughout that'll help work at this firm, the one we were talking about. We've talked to JEO Engineering, who does a lot of pool work. I know they've done a few in Charles City and others, and so we would have a report done to see just how bad is this pool? Structurally, what are we talking about? What would it be to repair it as it sits in place? There are other examples they provided us where they have taken an existing pool and you blow out one of the walls, create zero entry. You rehab what's there and add the amenities you're thinking if the core is solid enough to take it. Garrett and I have been to New Hampton, they kind of did that there. Parts of that pool is 100 years old. A lot of the newer parts, it's you would never know it was that old. It's got zero entry in 2 places, it's well done. You can add some of the other amenities, or depending on how much that would cost us or if it's feasible, if the core is not as good as we hope, we may be building a new one. And those are the options we want to investigate as we go forward. So going into a referendum this fall, we know exactly what we're wanting. We've talked to the community, we've got that input. We've got input from you as council, so we know what you're looking at. We have dollars attached to it, and we can actually get this done. In the meantime, do we open the pool that we have now with the cracks and issues and again, the painting is needed, the leaking, the whole thing. So I don't know, Garrett, if there's anything else you want to add, I mean, you certainly don't have to, but I'm just, it's where we are. Like I said, it was just another option of what if, and I guess we see, do we need it or not?
Are you wanting our discussion on that right now?
I do, I want to know your thoughts.
Do you have to paint it?
I'll let Garrett answer that, I'm not.
So what it comes down to is my plan for budgeting for the painting of it, it would not take place until the fall of '24. Anyway, we could just pull that out. If that was the case, you're still gonna have $100,000
Yeah.
deficit.
Yeah.
But yeah, as for the painting, that would not be done before this season anyway.
Okay.
But if we're gonna continue to go forward, we have to do it.
Correct.
Because it's a safety issue to have lanes marked, et cetera, and
Right. And I have not been contacted by the, the department yet when they've come in and inspected and say, this needs to get painted, this needs to get painted. I'm guessing that is going to happen in June or July when they're there this year.
who inspects it?
Black Hawk County.
I guess my concern of not opening the pool is our staffing issues that we've had there in the past. And if we don't have those positions available to the people that have been good enough to fill them the last few years, then they go look elsewhere. What are the chances we get them back once we do open?
That is a concern of mine, definitely, because, I saw what it did during the COVID year when we didn't open in 2020. I've sat and thought a lot about it and what it would do, because if we don't open this year, then we wouldn't be open again until there's either a new pool or this one's remodeled. And so at that point, you're looking, I would say, a minimum of 3 years before it would, before we would have something open. So my concern would be that any guards that we do get, 3 years from now or 4 years from now, I'm gonna have a lot of 15-year-olds and, and nobody else. That's not necessarily true. I don't know how that's going to play out, but it is a concern that I have, yes.
I think the same guards you'd have now, 3 years from now, you may not have.
Correct.
There's no guarantee what you have today and open it would be here in 3 years.
Right.
As they graduate out, they're already in college, they may leave. So I don't know if that's a fair argument, because that's assuming everybody we have is gonna stay with us for the next 3 years, which we know doesn't happen.
But the people
Correct.
that might join us in the next year, 2 years, will go find something else.
That's very possible, and they could anyway, based on pay.
Right.
We've already seen that happen too.
The other side of that is, in 3 years, if we do have a new pool or remodeled pool, there might be some excitement to be
Yeah, to work
there.
it. I mean, what's the
Absolutely.
average
So-
length of stay of a lifeguard? How many years do they stay?
I would say we usually get them as sophomores and either senior year or freshman year of high school, or I'm sorry, freshman year of college. So
4 years.
3 to 4 years is what we usually keep them.
Yeah.
There's some that stick around for 6, there's some that don't make it the first season, so,
Yeah.
but
So it passes inspection despite the fact that it leaks water every year?
yeah, that's not
What are they
anything that they
inspecting
look
it
for.
for?
They're inspecting it for things like signage, for paint, for, things in the filter room, stuff like that. They're not concerned about it leaking water. They really have no way to inspect that.
I mean, I think for me, the biggest negative about closing the pool is it's one less thing for people to do. For recreation, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing for me. I think that if we do close the pool for 3 years, you're looking at a whole new crop of lifeguards probably anyhow. You've got to find a manager. That almost seems to be as tough as finding trained lifeguards, but I think if we open a nice shiny new or remodeled pool in 3 or 4 years, that's a pull to get people to come work. But yeah, I think the biggest issue for me is just the lack of having that recreation for people. And what can we do to, advertise the W or whatever we need to do to replace those opportunities.
And I don't disagree, and we've talked about that ahead of time, but then the other piece that we're looking at is, what do we need for a pool?
Yeah.
You look at where we are, you have a new pool in Shell Rock, you do have the W, though, some people say it's cost prohibitive, and I think it can be. You have the pool at Prairie Lakes, took, 9 years? No, I'm sorry, 5 years to get it done. You're 15 minutes away from the falls in Cedar Falls, you're 25 minutes away from one of the largest water parks in, the state, if not the state. We have pools all over the place.
Yeah.
Within a 20-some minute radius, 25-minute radius. So that's the other thing we've been struggling with is, we talk about this great huge pool. Do we need all that or not? Are we gonna draw from all these other areas, or are we gonna lose to other areas? Or is it gonna be kinda same as where we are now? We build this wonderful, beautiful pool and we still lose $100,000 a year. Should it be another big pool like this? Should it be a splash pad? Should it be, that's what we're gonna have to go through with the support
Yeah.
regardless. But our whole goal is, this was budgetary,
Right.
more than anything was $150,000. At some point in the next year, we continue to ride this until there is or isn't. That's what we were looking at. So
Yeah.
again, it's your
Yeah.
discussion, your decision. We just wanted to outline, we didn't just blindly say, oh, looks like a big number, take it.
I would also say
We
that I'm
talked through it quite a
concerned
bit.
about an empty pool being an attractive target for vandalism or like general miscreants causing problems. I mean,
It's already that.
Well, I was
and
gonna
it's
say, a
open.
full pool is that too.
okay.
Yeah.
Garrett, what has, if I remember correctly from the reports we got from Leisure Services, the attendance at the pool the last couple of years has been pretty strong, right? Has it been increasing, decreasing, about the same?
So the first 2 years after COVID, very strong, lots of attendance. This last year, not as much. We just barely broke the 10,000 mark. It was 10,000 and change. I don't remember the exact number.
Do you remember what it was before COVID?
Before COVID, and I don't know these numbers for sure, but I'm gonna say in the 12, 13 range. And that's what it was the first couple years after as well. But then, yeah, it took a pretty big drop off this last year. And you could tell daily, you know, when you were at the pool, you could tell it was not very busy each day.
Well, that's where we wonder, you know, is the opening of Shell Rock's new pool, is that drawing people? Is it the water park, the
Yeah.
national attention it's got, you know, what is causing that? Was it the weather, which plays a big part in it too? Was it a cooler summer? All things we just can't predict, so.
Well, I kind of agree with Ann that it's important to give people things to do, and you know, to have a pool here in the city. I think as we're looking later on this year, what kind of replacement we might have, or renovations we might have on this one. You know, maybe closing the pool for a couple of years will give us an idea of, you know, when we hear how many people are complaining about there not being a pool, you know, what kind of pool we want to put in for a new pool, if we do that. I kind of hate to see it closed, but boy, it is in bad shape. We've had issues in prior years with staffing, with the budget issues. I would hate to see it closed, but I think that is certainly a possibility that I would not necessarily be strongly opposed to.
Yeah, just because I think
kind of
it's,
agree with you, Rod. I mean, if the public doesn't have a pool this summer, how's that gonna change the vote in November?
Yeah.
What kind of support, you know, are we gonna gather? We're gonna
Yeah.
really,
And I don't
really
think
know in November.
Just
how
if we don't have a
important it is.
pool and people start, more people go to Shell Rock or Cedar Falls or whatever, I don't think it's like we're gonna lose those people forever when we put in a new pool. It's not gonna be a water park, in my mind at least. It's just a place for you to drop your kids off and have them splash around in the water for a couple of hours. So, yeah, like I said, I would not be totally opposed to closing it for a couple of years.
yeah, I wouldn't either. And I think, you know, the whole plan we did for Memorial Park, what I thought we were going to get out of that was a more detailed plan for the pool.
We all
And an
did.
assessment.
We all thought
And
that.
so I think that was a missed opportunity. And if we can get that from this firm, you know, that you're working with now, I think that's important. And I, you know, even though I hate to see us lose a source of, or an opportunity for recreation, I think maybe we should do this. We should close it. I mean, you know, and you said earlier, we want people, Julie, to know that this isn't just about money. Well, it is about money.
Some of it
It's
is.
about money. And I
Some of it
think,
is.
you know, we're in a pickle financially, and so every area, hopefully with the exception of public safety, is going to have to make sacrifices. And you know, you've been holding that pool together for years with duct tape and, you know,
Rope.
rabbit's feet
It's a lot
and
of
whatever else.
cotton,
So, you know, I'm not opposed to closing it, even though I don't like it.
But I think it's a good point, though, is to take away one more amenity in the summer that kids can go to, it's reasonable.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that, so
Yeah.
it makes it such a hard thing to even bring it up, is what if? But, you know, we look at the caulks and the seams, we look at what we don't see. I don't know if in 60 years, has it eroded behind a wall so far that wall's a 1/4 inch thick now and it's gonna pop open someday? We don't know. Our goal is, even regardless of what happens, try and get the cameras down, try and get through the drains, try and see where it is leaking, one, or what does it look like? How is the pipe system? What does it do? That's what a firm's gonna do as well, is come in and figure those things out for us, but, this was kind of that, I don't wanna say it's a Hail Mary, this was just a big one to throw out there for discussion, because it does have repercussions.
Yeah.
So
Can we
I-
hold it together? I think we probably can another year, should we? I don't know.
I want to ask a question that may be a non sequitur. When is the renovation of the library supposed to be finished?
I believe in June, July.
Okay, so,
July.
I mean, I would be concerned if the library and the pool were both closed all summer.
Fair
If we
enough.
were like really cutting away opportunities for our kids. But, you know, if we're talking about closing the pool, I mean, the library's open, you can go play in the Cedar River as long as you're below the dam. I mean, but, yeah.
You don't mind?
Let's not promote that.
Don't say
Please,
that.
us,
Don't say that.
But I mean, I think the pool and the library are probably the two biggest recreation opportunities for kids in this town.
right?
And I would be really distraught if they were both gone at the same time.
I
What was-
understand that completely.
What was the average daily attendance at the pool? last year? Because the 10,000 is duplicate numbers.
Right.
So how many people were actually at the pool?
Probably, I would say average 2 to 250,
Okay.
you know, and, yeah, and I mean, that's just,
On a
yeah,
hot
attendance
day.
wise. Yeah, and I mean, you know, in June of the previous year, we were at 350, 400 on the hot days. But I would say about 250 was the average.
I have a question and a comment. What do we have for an estimate on JEO's analysis?
We're working through that. It'd be less than 50, they said for sure, they're just putting the numbers together, and we had budgeted about that. So we're not as worried about that being funded. We think it's a good price for what we're gonna get out of it, because this will be detailed. And they will work with us all the way on the committees, the town halls, everything, start to finish is what's included in that.
And that's money that we have to expend whether we close the pool for this season or not.
Yeah.
I would want it
Unless we
done.
say we're gonna close the pool and we're never gonna have one.
To get ready for the
Right.
referendum.
I'd wanna know what we're dealing with, and plus it's gonna give us budgetary estimates going into the referendum, what you're gonna wanna know. What is it, how we're funding it, all that, so the public is well aware. So regardless, same as the clubhouse, whatever firm doing it as well, we would wanna get that information figured out and have a design so somebody can see what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we close it for this season, the savings on that would more than cover the cost of this beginning to get a plan.
Right,
for
and I do have it already funded in this year, so
That's right,
it's already
okay.
taken care of. That part is actually here. We were planning for this a year
Okay.
ago, so.
The other comment that I wanted to make is, if we close it, and I echo everything everybody else has said, and, you know, we certainly hate to add to the list of, there's nothing to do in Waverly.
Right.
But I feel like maybe we could somehow be creative in creating some kind of a campaign to kind of offset that. So whether it is similar to what the downtown did when we had to be torn up for 2 years. And there was a very well-thought-out plan for how are we going to try to counteract the negative effects of being torn up for 2 years. So whether that means working out some deal with the W, that there could be more easily accessible use of the W than what people ordinarily feel they have. Or maybe there's special events that Parks and Rec could promote in the parks, or, you know, whatever. If we could just, rather than just saying, okay, we're either gonna close it or we're not, if we close it, what can we do to try to compensate for the loss of that during this season, or the next few seasons? That
I think
wouldn't
it's
cost any
perfect.
money.
I think it's a great idea. I'm glad they'll be doing it. I have no idea what that would look like.
Yeah, we don't really
I
have Parks and
don't
Rec
right now
staff
either.
who do activities, right? The library does activities throughout the city and the W staff, so we'd really
We'd
have to
host it
coordinate.
somewhere too, which
Right.
is difficult with the park activities being so heavy in that time of year.
Yeah.
Where could we host it? It's logistically
Yeah.
difficult, but nothing's impossible. We can certainly look at that.
Well, and if you just think about all the things that that the library offers that far too many people don't know about or take advantage of. And there's the block parties that Human Equity and Diversity Commission is organizing. And I just feel like if maybe we put some effort into trying to coordinate and promote those kinds of things, it would help somewhat to offset the loss of.
Yeah.
No, I think we can look at it, and I think at this point in time, sir, it might be relevant for a small break to reset.
Yeah, my only comment that I would make on the pool before we do that is, and I was gonna bring it up when we start talking about funding the pool, is I just remember when Shell Rock Pool opened up their new pool, the front page of the paper talked about how they had done some public fundraising for that as well. And so that's an element that I think we ought to consider as well, for the, rather than simply being the city putting it on the tax base, the whole.
Right.
Looking at some public funding to do some of that. But yes, I would be willing to entertain a break if council is.
Can I have one kind of comment or question? So if we close the pool and we reopen it, so Okay, we're talking about a certain amount of savings for not painting and a certain amount of savings for not opening it.
Correct.
And we're talking $50,000 is the painting, and about $100,000 is the pool. If we close and then 3-4 years, whatever, we get a new pool built, that 100,000 operation fees is back in the budget.
Yes, it is.
So this is a temporary fix until, so it's not like
correct.
this is something that, when we're talking about a budget for going forward, closing the pool is a temporary fix.
It is.
Okay.
Well, the painting is something we would not have. when
The
we
painting we
reopen.
would not have to do if we had a new pool.
Some of the efficiencies might help some, but there'll still be, payroll will still be things that it will still cost us in the end. It is not a money generating item
Okay.
like a lot of amenities in the city are not. So you are correct.
Okay.
It does not just go away and, oh, we save it. It comes back.
Right.
It's just when. And so
Okay.
I don't think we have an issue with opening the pool again. I just think at some point in time, we have to figure out how much longer can we keep limping it along. Maybe it's one more year, you see how the vote goes. If the vote doesn't go, then I don't think we open it the next year. Because we simply cannot keep putting money into this if we're not gonna progress to something that doesn't have to have money put into it like that.
And
So-
I would honestly say that we're probably going to have to close the pool while we're building a new one. I know we had these plans before, can we keep the old one open while we build the new one?
Right.
But it may just make sense to close the pool, do a whole renovation, rebuild, new, and then open it a year or two later.
And depending on what's decided at the committee, you may be renovating the existing pool anyway, which may be closed. So that's all something we'll know more about in 6 months, but for now, we're just brainstorming what's possible. And again, none of this is, we're adamant about, we're not gonna defend this. It was just a what if for an open pool, and I don't disagree with a lot of what's been said. We certainly can. We're ready to do that. It was just a what if we do this? So.
So, what's council want, 10, 15?
10-minute break.
10
minutes.
10-minute break? Okay, we'll take a 10-minute break, be back here about 12 after or so. We'll go ahead and get restarted here. So we've had kind of a discussion of some of the big initial slots. Where do we go next?
Well, the other thing we haven't talked about, which you have to make a decision on, if not today, soon, is how do you want to fund the nonprofits that came before you last meeting? And so maybe that's a good place to start, is looking at what that is. And so I'll let you address that in the manner you want to. Whether you have certain ones you want to talk about first, or how you want to go through it, but that's probably one of the remaining things we've not really discussed.
I'll start with the big one, and I just don't see how we can fund the chamber's request for that big of a jump. For what they were asking. That just seems out of line with what we're capable of dealing with right now.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion on that, obviously.
I would agree with that. I would rather have the money invested in our own economic development office, and let Connie do the marketing that she thinks would be helpful, whether that's for tourism or for recruiting workforce or recruiting new businesses.
Ditto.
And what was our contribution this fiscal year to the chamber?
45,000.
So our membership is 10,
Yes, ma'am.
and what's our Main Street contribution?
25. The last 10 is for tourism.
Okay, I would propose doing 35,000 and allow Connie to work on tourism through marketing.
Discussion on that? Any council want to speak to that beyond?
So was it the food bank is on here? I would like to continue.
I was just asking on the chamber discussion.
Oh, the chamber.
It's not a vote, but it's just kind of discussion as which way we want to go. If there's not a whole lot of dissension on.
I certainly don't want to increase the amount of funding that we've given to them.
Dr. Rothy mentioned pulling
Right.
the tourism part of it out of it and actually decreasing it.
I would not be opposed to that. I mean, budgets are tight, and we've had a lot of questions about if that money is well spent. I mean, I think they can argue it is, but I think we also get a lot of people questioning it. And I think that if budget's tight, it's a good time to see how much that money makes a difference.
I think I stated last year that, as a small business owner, I think that a healthy chamber is extremely important, and I think it's important not only to me as an individual business owner, but as a community. I think that's really important. But times are really tight financially, and I think we have to be realistic about what we can and can't do. I certainly wouldn't want to send the message that the chamber's not important, or their functions aren't important, or anything like that, but it's just a reality, I think, right now, that we can only do what we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think our obligation is to fund city services as best we can.
Okay. Brian, you were going to another,
Yeah, so, let me find that, because these things aren't all in the same tab, there it is. So there was the request from, let me find it again.
The Northeast Iowa.
Northeast Iowa Community Action, I would like to continue funding them at the same rate we are. I think that's money well spent. I think it's important money for the community. We had a request from, was it the Bremen County Historical Society? I'm not interested in putting the money in for them at this time.
I think Heritage Day's request was the same, was
Yeah.
it not, as last year?
Yeah, I'd support Heritage Days, keeping it at the same level.
The senior center asked for, I think, $2,000 more
From 10 to 12.
compared to last year. I mean, I do think, they have expanded services, they have more visitors coming in there than they have. They're trying to create more low-cost or free opportunities for seniors, but, I think they also have private fundraising that they do too, so I think if we needed to cut that, we could, but I do support what they're doing. I think they're a very active board and are trying to be creative, and they're very transparent when the city has asked, like when James asked to see their financials. So.
So up the 2, give them the additional 2, or?
Well, I'm
keep it at
biased
10?
because I go and I think they do a nice job and they're increasing services and their numbers are way up. And I think that's in part because, they've put a lot of their own funding and grant money into improving their space and what they can do, especially their kitchen and their amenities and just making that building more accessible. So I would support giving them their request, but if
I would agree
people-
that, I would support that. I mean, we could cut it if we had to, but I would prefer to fund them at the slightly higher level. I'm gonna throw on the Historic Preservation Commission, kind of to that same tune. Historic Preservation's at 750, and they've been at 750 for a long time. And I think they requested an increase to 1250, which, is a bump for them. It's a difference of $500. And it puts them, in about average for the state in terms of the funding of historical societies. So I would support that small bump.
Yeah, none of these requests are unreasonable. I think just as a general statement, I don't think at this point we need to fund groups that we have not funded in the past
I would agree
without
with that.
having a full discussion of what benefit we would get from that group by funding them. The ones we have funded in the past, we know what benefits they provide, and, I'm not gonna nickel and dime this thing. So, that just in general, I don't think we should be looking at funding new requests. The ones the requests they had, I have really no problem with funding what they asked, except maybe, if we're looking at the chamber, I think that's kind of a separate issue.
I suppose one question I do have is looking at the human equity and diversity. Because they're requesting, I believe, 5,500, which is a significant increase over, or is that the same as last year?
Same.
It's the same as last year? Okay, that's fine.
And I think, they came to council last week, and I think
They
we
made a
forgot
good
to
take.
have them go through the detail of their budget. I think she was going to do that,
Okay.
but they did not. And I don't know if they used their whole budget from last year. Did they use the money that we gave them last year?
I don't know, Carl would probably have to answer that.
Did not.
They had a very well thought out plan, and
Yeah, they did.
I was impressed with what they were looking at
Well,
doing.
I suppose, I appreciate that they didn't feel the need to spend their entire budget too. I mean, if we budget this and they don't spend it, it's easier for me to budget to them again.
Right.
I don't know that we had any additionals on there. The other one that we didn't get anything on here was the transit.
Oh, intercom.
We had intercog, but the basically Iowa Regional Transit,
I think it's through them.
That's through
that's
intercom.
that through intercog.
Yeah.
That's the dollar per capita for transportation.
Okay,
That's what they've done.
so it's the same as the Northeast Iowa Action in terms of the amount.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Yeah, we talked about the 500 for historic preservation, but
So do you need any more input from us on those, James, or does that sort of tell you where
I
we're?
don't think so. I mean, I haven't heard some dissension, so I mean, I think by consensus, without an actual vote, I think we
Right.
have the numbers we would insert into here.
Do we need to discuss Gross Cedar Valley again? I mean,
We sure can.
Our contact with them is up.
Where's that?
Yeah, we sure can.
I know we've discussed the last couple of years about whether we wanted to continue with that or not.
I guess,
Is that under the economic?
They
Yeah, it's
budgeted
under
2,500 a year.
Where is it?
other community, it's
Other
under the
community.
health and social
Social
services
services.
tab,
Okay.
but it's a separate little line item.
We reduced that more than half last year, from 5,500 to 2,500. And then they have a new director. I don't have a lot of heartburn of giving that individual an attempt to try and involve us more, go forward, same as we did when they changed the last time.
Right.
But I would not fund it more than just this year based on that, so it would continue to be a year-by-year basis. And if we don't see results, I'd be all for pulling it completely if we have to.
Yep, I'm fine with bringing them in and having them prove to us what they're doing for us.
Prove what they're doing for us, not just what they're doing.
Right, what they're doing for us.
For us,
It's- Other discussion? Okay. Other,
So I guess probably the only other item we probably need to cover then today, till we get to like your final thoughts on how we want to move forward, would be any sizable projects that we really haven't gotten into a whole lot. Things that could follow into your debt category. If we were to do any debt this year, projects that we would be looking at. There's only a couple that I think we probably need to discuss myself, but again, if there's others, you know, staff, we've talked about a number of different things. The first big one, if we were to go forward with it, would be to continue replacing the rail trail bridges. We're doing the largest one this spring in Baskins Creek. The proposal we have, and we've been looking at, is doing the three smaller ones next, whether it's Prairie, I think it's Cemetery and Slemons. Because I really don't want to be tearing up the trail for 7 or 8 years, one bridge at a time, if we can somehow group these together. They're definitely smaller than any of the others we have. And we'd be looking at trying to get those done in the next year as well. So that's one item I wouldn't mind looking at, talking about. And the other, I guess, I would have probably Justin McClellan come up and discuss. We're looking at creating our own fueling station, so our own fuel barrels out of Public Works to help offset cost of fuel, which is substantial. You consider how many pieces of equipment we have, how many miles of driven, and fuel to use. And we've been looking at the possibility of what if we have our own fueling station instead? What does that look like pricing wise, cash flow and so forth? So I'll let you talk to it, Justin.
We use a lot of fuel as
Yeah,
a city. Between refuse, plowing streets, every department, obviously those are some of the larger ones. Anywhere from 70,000 and 100,000 gallons in a year between all fuels. I've met with the county, they've been in service for 1 year. This is a picture of their current setup. It's 15,000 gallon and a 12,000 gallon tank and then a 500 smaller. I would be looking at 2 12,000 gallon tanks. That's what's recommended by the company that I talked to. One would be gasohol, basically your ethanol-based gas, and then the other one would be diesel, the off-road red dyed diesel that we can run in our vehicles. The smaller one is a non-ethanol blend. That'd be for your lawnmowers, your small engines and stuff that usually don't run ethanol through. That's one that you could still pick up at the stations, but you see a considerable cost savings on it. And I think across the board, you know, originally when James and I talked about this, we were thinking, you know, if it could be at 8, 9, 10-year payoff, it'd be worth it. Well, the last numbers I saw when the prices were up, if you can play the markets, and this gives us that availability to do that, it could be a considerable, probably down to 5, 6 years possibly, 7 years on just fuel. And one thing I look at is not just the cost of that, it's cost of man hours of, you know, this town's not set up the best to fill up with diesel. And it's not a station for like semis to pull on or bigger trucks. So a lot of times these guys are waiting 10, 15 minutes for trucks to pull out of the stations, and we can fill up out there every day, put them back in the barn for the night. everything's ready to go. I look at it as just as time savings on some of the guys too. This system also comes with, what I got quoted, comes with a fill right monitoring system. So basically, right now, we pull all of Quick Star's, use for example, their receipts, bill them out for each department. Well, this will automatically spit it out, and it can be billed individually. And yes, it will only allow certain vehicles to fill up with certain types of fuel that it's allowed to, so we won't get gas and diesel, diesel and gas, those situations we've had in the past. The numbers I got, it's kind of daunting a little bit, and some of them are kind of a little bit unknowns. I got some quotes from some local vendors that sell this. Like I said, Bremer County was a perfect example because they've been a year in operation. He told me, don't do this, get hold of this guy now, like whenever you do things. And, you're looking at ballpark 275 to 290,000 for this. And that includes, some of the work possibly could be done by Public Works, putting the bollards in for the protection, some of the concrete work. As you can see, it's a fairly simple pad. Some of the permits, there's a crane rental, there's a couple other options on there. The company that I got pricing from was the local one from Metropola. They do pretty much all the ones. Tankers are about 7,500 gallons, 7,800 gallons, I think he said. So the 12,000 gives you a little bit of buffer room to see, okay, the price fluctuations we see, we could make it a month, or what can we make it until some of the prices fluctuate a little bit. One other price included here is, I included a gate out of Public Services where it'll be housed. That would be a keypad operation, so we can kind of lock it up. I mean, you're never going to be able to lock it up 100%. Someone could drive around in the grass or all the way around, but gate and some associated fencing out there. This would allow access for PD after hours, or anybody after hours as well. I guess any questions I can try to answer.
And the fire department would be able to fill up here?
They could if they wanted to.
Even their big ass
Yeah,
tankers?
that's the thing, is all departments can utilize it, because we're currently dividing a lot of that stuff out anyways, out of Public Services.
So basically, any city vehicles would be able to use it.
The hard ones are mowers and stuff. We've talked about, Paul Chevelle and I have talked about like a satellite station, a tank on site where they have a smaller tank where they can house it. WPC currently has one for their mower out there. We could actually transport, that's what the county does, is transport to their satellite things from the main tank. But it's just, right now it's just talk on what we could possibly do. But that's a considerable smaller chunk of the use is mowers,
Is there any scenario where this doesn't pay for itself eventually?
Unless you had some major problems with the tanks, and I mean, or your equipment, or repairs. As of right now, I think a lot of it, it's warrantied out so far. It's serviceable. Your pumps are some of your bigger costs besides the tanks. I think that's the biggest is going to be your maintenance, but I don't see, you save that initial cost that you pay at the pump. I mean, basically, you're always going to get that. The one other variable they've done, the county actually booked it for a year. They tried that the first year. They thought, hey, we'll try booking it. And it worked. They ended up saving a considerable amount, but they thought they could get it at the pump for less. So, that's what they're doing, or per tanker for less. So that's what they've been doing currently. It's been working well. So I don't see, I'm not going to guarantee there is anything unforeseen, but I don't see there's a place where we're going to lose that.
And what's the lifespan for these?
I foresee at least 20, as long as you keep the paint up, if there's any painting needed or any maintenance items. Obviously you got your filters, and a pump's going to go out eventually, and some of those things. One of the concerns I do have, and it comes with a fueling or a pod. I think one of the pictures shows actually that one right in the middle. That's where you punch your code in for the vehicle, the person, mileage, and all that stuff goes into that. That's one thing I could see down the road. Obviously an iPad and some of those things, there are going to be some costs that, how those work. This program does have an app, so the guys could actually punch it in on their app on their phone and then just go, it'll turn it on. It's cloud-based. The one thing I have not gotten an exact answer is what the yearly cost is. Obviously, there's going to be a cost with cloud-based, like anything else.
How are you handling your DEF requirements? What are you doing for DEF now?
We actually do DEF individually, we're dealing with a new vendor, or looking at a new vendor right now, but we have 55-gallon drums on a cart with a pump. So the guys just fill them up. Most of the equipment's all in the same area, so they just wheel it one-to-one inside. They do offer heated def options, but I'm just like, I don't want to get involved with that. Heater goes out, then you got more maintenance items. And the guys prefer to have the def, we buy it in bulk, and we're looking to actually get totes on site, so the guys can fill them up, save a little money there.
You might want to explain what DEF
DEF
is.
is.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
Sorry, diesel exhaust fluid. It injects
right.
it into the
Okay.
exhaust to make the fuel burn cleaner. So it's a urea-based item. So it's a fertilizer almost.
Do you have somewhere in here what the cost of that was, what you're proposing, or the estimated cost of this? I know we talked about it.
Yeah, total is 275 to 290 is the price range I got right now. I'm still waiting. It's hard to get prices back on some of these items. The permits and stuff are be ones we find out from, we got fire marshal to deal with and a couple of their codes. Some of those items, it depends what we can do in-house. I mean, I'll have to look through the logistics if we can do some of that stuff. Like concrete, we're more than capable of doing that. The bollards, we can source those ourselves. It's not like you have to hire a company to come in and do this. It's just what can we do ourselves?
And you said this would be located out at Public Works?
We talked about when we were building the public works out there, that's been mentioned a couple times about having fuel tanks.
We had them for years. And then I think what happened was the tanks probably started leaking or suspect, and that was in the whole area of, storage tanks situations. Now you got a lot more requirements, double walls, containment, stuff you gotta do to accommodate that, and that's probably why those were removed.
And this is this funded all by road use tax, or is this is a capital project, so we're gonna be, but when we pay off those bonds, can we pay it off with road use tax, or do we or other like public fees?
So when we look at that, it'd be part of a GO bond. If you can go out to debt this year at all, that's something you have to decide. We would look at percentage-wise, the history of what we build out, whether it's 6 months or a year, how much of it is for general fund departments. That part would come out of your debt levy. Whether it's water, sewer, we would split it out accordingly, just like we are the fuel now, is how the payment would also go.
Okay.
Same thing we've kind of done with some of the other things that are citywide, but yet sitting there. That's how we would purchase that out.
So in essence, in the same way that we're tracking how much fuel people are using, we can use that to determine what share of the debt comes from those different departments.
Right, because we should be paying for water usage vehicles from the water fund, that's the point of it, and sewer,
Right.
solid waste. And then the rest, there's no point breaking out the police and library and fire.
Right.
It's all general fund, it's all the same budget, we can put it in a spot, and that's what the end up being. For debt service, it would come from that.
And the bookmobile could fill up here too.
It certainly could.
Majority of your users are enterprise, solid waste, streets. Those are your largest
Right.
ones for the most, PD has quite a bit as well,
Yeah.
but that's just nature of that.
Yeah.
But those are your largest ones would be enterprise.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Justin.
I personally think it would be a good project to go forward with.
I'd be supportive of this.
I thought it's been a good idea since then. I'd mentioned previously, even talking to the school about that, but I think they would, I don't know, their buses may cause us to have to, buying in bulk, maybe saving on, but I don't know how, the funds and any of all that would have to coordinate, so.
Okay, from a large project standpoint, I know there's been a lot of other things we've talked about. I think we've kind of pulled back on some of those because, again, as the levy sits, we've tried to fit this in the best we could to not increase that levy. If the reductions we've done so far to date would hold, what is our current levy, Val? Not to put you on the spot, but. But we're putting you on the
Everything by
spot.
hand as you
So-
look into it.
So while Val is distracted, we also have, I would say, bituminous seal coat, that stuff that's gonna happen again.
Yeah, that's all in another fund. that's
Well,
transferred
I'm looking
into
at
ours.
all our capital funds.
Yep.
Are we talking about alleyway reconstruction again this year?
Yep, that's in
Okay.
local option sales tax.
So that's another, okay.
Yeah, we're just looking for variations above what had been in the budget itself already, which we've
Okay.
already kind of covered through local option sales tax, road use tax, et cetera, so.
We'd be looking at 16.9.
Okay.
What was that?
We're about 16.9 with the reductions, which is a little below where we are today, current year, so. But each million is, what do we figure that out? Is it 20 cents on the levy? For each million, it's just the way it factors out the dollar amounts. So, yeah, and so I guess bridges, we should have probably hit on that as well. Do you have interest in continuing to replace the bridges on the trail system? Our estimate there was 1.4 to do those 3 bridges in the next year.
I would be supportive of that.
I'm supportive of it, but I'm just wondering if that's when we stretch
Well,
and do 2 instead of 3.
I mean, I think part of it is we're talking about mobilization costs. I think we're also talking about, how long are we shutting the trail down for to get multiple done? I mean, I think James talked about, if we can get a whole bunch done in one season, that's a good thing. Some of these bridges are necessary to get to other bridges and kind of to do maintenance on the trail. There's a couple of bridges that are not rated for some of our equipment, so I think those kind of are becoming more urgent.
2 of the 3 in this list are weight restrictions already, and they're actually bookends to where we can't get mowers and equipment across to mow what's in there, which I know the guys love doing that by hand, but there's not much else you can do at that point because they are restricted in weight. So 2 of the 3 are that inspection. The other one was a small one that was right in that group. So.
And then we're talking about mobilization costs.
And well, and then the time it's down, you're right, if we do, it'd be 7 years of trail interruption, which it's fine, that's what it is. That's certainly for you to decide, so.
And these bridges are 25 years old?
More than that.
No, they were there before the trail was there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, they're much older than that.
About 100 years
I
plus.
mean, costs of doing it are not gonna go down.
But nothing major has been done to them since the rail trail was built, right?
Well, they've been overhauled, I think, one time. I think they're probably trying to think Justin's 50, 60, somewhere in there, Garrett. I mean, it's,
I think what's
They're
been
not
done to them
original
is
to when it started.
resurfacing.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's been anything done to the underside.
Structure.
I mean, I think some of the structures have been upgraded since they were originally 100 some years ago. It's just there's still a lot of age on them now to where you're seeing issues from pieces that have rotted away or are not touching, and they're inspected. So structurally, it's okay for what they have. It's just not able to be driven on by a lot of things. I mean, it's weight restrictions now, so.
Yeah, and well, this is one of those projects where kicking a can down the road doesn't really help us that much. I guess I'm not sure that you answered what I thought was Brian's questions. Are there some cost savings in doing several bridges in 1 year?
Yeah.
Yeah, the mobilization, that makes sense. It's just,
Yeah.
my only thought would be doing 2 instead of 3. But
Yeah, well, but
how much of a savings are we really getting?
it sounds like the third bridge is a small one, because the other 2, like with the rate restrictions, are really necessary. And the third one is kind of in the same region, and it's small, so I think the difference between 2 and 3 isn't.
Will you have a more competitive bid process if you
I think
do all
you will.
3, rather than wanting some other company to come back and do one smaller project?
I think you save on engineering 3 versus 1 because the same process is happening, the overall
fine with
administration of it. You're
Same
doing one
material.
site, same material, same bidder.
Yep, and
I
that
think versus 3.
answers my
so
question on that.
That's the only thing we're trying to do is economy of scale.
Yep.
What we can do if we can do it.
I just wish it didn't cost so much.
Me too. But you think Baskins is $750,000 or so by itself?
Well, I'm looking
That's the
at,
big one?
I probably shouldn't even bring this up, but
It's all right.
the Green Bridge, we were looking at $1.5, $2 million to replace the Green Bridge, and now we're looking at $900,000 to replace the Baskins Creek Bridge. It's like, whoa, this is getting expensive.
Well, and if the Green Bridge would have been done when it was first talked about, you could have done the whole thing for less than $1 million.
Right.
That's right.
And it was almost $4 million by the time we got to it, decided not to do it.
Yeah.
So, that's the thing, if will these be $2.5 million in 5 years?
They're not
I don't
getting
know.
cheaper.
I don't know, so.
Yeah, it will not, the
The price will
cost
not
will
go
not go
down.
down. So it's a
Yeah.
question of, do we want to keep the trail or not keep the trail? And I think, we definitely want to keep it, and there's no reason to punt or kick the can down the road on this.
I think about the bridge that went out on the bike trail up in Charles City a few years ago, and that's a tiny little 5-mile loop trail, and it was closed for 3 years. And I don't think we want to risk losing our trail for an extended period of time.
Are there any other major projects besides the fuel tanks and the,
Not that I had, I mean, obviously, you've all been contacted about pickleball, that's for you to decide. I'm not gonna add that into here unless you want me to. I think that's something that's gotta be location discussion, size, number, cost, we can certainly have that discussion. We were looking at some significant asphalt paving, some lots, things like that. I think we can get by without that for another year if we're gonna try and keep this lower. We can get a lot of gravel for what that is, it's just not as we wanna advance some areas, but I really didn't have anything else significant to throw on there. Just to continue the bridge replacement, because we do have weight restrictions on 2 of the 3, and then fuel barrel, because it does cash flow eventually, and I think it's a good move going forward. So from a large project standpoint, that's all I had to bring to you.
I want to just back up one step.
Sure.
Pickleball, I want to understand what you were saying. I don't have a problem not discussing at this point, but.
We don't have a solid location of where it would go.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of
Right.
options and variations, and so that's not something I'm bringing forward today, because a couple of those options are very complicated.
Yes.
One takes quite a while, if you're going Memorial Park towards the pool.
Yeah.
Probably gotta get the pool figured out before we start. So that's what I'm getting at, that one's much more complicated, it's not simply, hey, we got a spot, we're just not doing it.
yeah,
We don't really have a spot necessarily that's been identified or agreed upon by you to do it, nor do we know how many or cost or,
Yeah.
we can get all that together for you, but
No.
that's, if there's an interest or push to do it, so.
I
No,
can't-
I understand all of that. My question was, how does that impact the budget that we're putting together now? I mean, if for some reason we decided to go ahead with pickleball, I know we haven't discussed that, that's certainly not a given.
Sure.
But what do we do in terms of funding if we decide to do that? Do we wait until next year when we're doing the budget, put it in then, or what do we do?
To me, when you're talking about a $4, $5, $6, $800,000 project, I don't think we tax for that. You've seen the difficulty we have now
Right.
with staying with our general fund. It goes to your debt market. That's the one way I think you can fund it. It's about the only way you can fund it, just like our fuel barrels that we'll divvy out, or a trail bridge, or anything like that.
But do we have to put that in the budget now, if we wanted to do it?
If you want to go to the debt market next year, this 25, then yes, you'd want to put it in now, so it's combined in with everything. We're not selling multiple bonds in a
And if
year.
we don't do it, even if we decide on a location and start making plans for it, we're not gonna be able to do it until next budget year.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
you know, for me, I cannot, I mean, I'm in favor of pickleball as part of our long-term recreation plans. I can't support putting it in the budget when we're laying off staff and considering closing the swimming pool. I just don't think this is the year to do it.
Right.
And we have, like James said, we have a lot more discussion to
Yeah.
go on that. How,
Yeah.
how many
Location.
courts we do, the location.
And private
all of that.
fundraising.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're really not ready to address that yet.
A couple of us have had contact asking about the Miracle Playground, is that the right word? That
Accessible playground. that's a-
accessible playground. Is my understanding correctly from what you told us that that's still in the works, that funding that is still there?
Yeah.
It's just taking longer to make it happen?
Yep.
So that's not something that we have to have a big discussion about for this coming year's budget?
No, the funding's already acquired, it's just sitting and waiting, and there's enough time based on your guidelines of when you have to spend it to allow it to happen. I wish we could just roll down to Norby's or Walmart and pick it up, but those things are expensive, they're built, they're designed, it just takes a while to get them in, then you have the prep as well, so the other matching part from the casino, I know Garrett's gonna reach out to the casino, let them know what our progress is. That's a reimbursement, so we wouldn't get that till we're done with it, most likely anyway, so, no, the funding is there, it's secure, and it's just waiting as we go forward. And we have a certain time frame it can wait, and it's well within that, if we're able to do it, say this fall. So I think our goal is to try and get this done this year, so.
Thank you.
You bet. So that's what we have as far as where we sit today. So like I said, I'm working through with Val, with everything we've talked about. I guess before we jump to the end of this, so we've gotten close to a fund balance of about 10%. And that's about the best we can do, and that's with everything you've seen, that gets us to about 10%. And that's if we don't bring back certain things, et cetera. If we have to, that's fine. We will certainly try and make that work, but at some point, it is what it is. And so I guess with everything we talked about, I want to get some consensus of, where do you sit on our staffing reduction, our capital things we've taken out, everything we've talked about. We want to probably reset and get an idea of where do you sit as a council. Because these are just recommendations from us. This is not something we just go and do like some people think we can. It has to go through all of you. This is your decision, not ours. We just provided options for you to consider. So I guess that's what I'd want to see is discussion from you. Where do we sit? Where do we not? What do we undo? What do we do? How do we move forward?
So James, the 10% fund balance, is that including these last two projects we talked about?
It is not, but
Not.
that's not general fund. This
Right.
is debt anyway, so it would not be a matter. This is more the tax levy itself would be impacted. So if you look at it, might be 1720, something like that roughly. Because as we allocate out the fuel barrels, it'd be about that
Okay.
on the levy. And when we started, we were 25 cents higher than that before we started reducing. But again,
Right.
with the 810, it's all fund balance talk at this point in time. You can't reduce the 810 levy unless you eliminate all the fund balance, everything we have, and then start to trickle down. But most of the stuff we're talking about only hits part of that, so that's why it makes it so difficult. It's not just simply $10,000 to $10,000. $10,000 is only $6,000 in that fund. And it's just hard depending on where it goes, so.
Okay.
With the staff reductions, those don't take place till July 1st because of the budget. Or
Some of that would be
do
more
we
immediate,
start
because
immediately?
again, with fund balance issues, it would draw down, it would assist in this year's fund balance, which we're still trying to keep and reeling from last year when we were only at 12%. So we're trying to help, because a gain in fund balance this year starts you with a higher fund balance next year, and that all factors out too. It's up to you how you want to do that. We can certainly do that July 1st.
Well,
Or-
that's what I'm wondering is, are we still having them until July 1st and then that's then? Or are they, if they know that it's being reduced and they find another position, that we just don't fill that at that point and?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll ask you the question, that if you're being laid off, and you know you're gonna be laid off, what is your work ethic gonna be?
Right.
What is your productivity gonna be?
That's my concern.
Will you be distracted doing your jobs? It puts you in a dangerous situation depending on what you're doing. Our goal is that you are on leave, and if you decide to move forward with a reduction, it would be basically now.
Okay.
And there would be a slight payout, so to speak, or a extension of funding to a certain point, benefits, all that, that has to be hammered out. That's what we're working through now, depending on what you decide to do. But keeping someone that mindset till July 1, I don't think is a good thing. And that's not what we've normally done if we've had to do this in the past, whether it's a termination or anything else. It's very briefly after, and they simply are removed from service, so.
Since we were talking about staff reductions, I was wondering if I could just make a clarification so the library has been asked to find $150,000, which we'll be working on in the coming days and weeks here. Given how the library budget is set up, there's really no way to do all of that without hitting staff. So I just wanted the council to understand that the library will also be looking at staff to cover that deficit. And it comes at a time that, we're opening a new teen room and we've got a new bookmobile and that kind of thing. So the dials that we have to turn are, hours of service and different programs that we have. And so things may look a little bit different after that. So I just wanted to clarify that that's how that amount affects us as well.
James, I have one, just question.
Yes, sir.
And we haven't talked about, it looks like we're building in a 3% pay raise through most of these departments.
For your non-bargaining, which we're working through that process, that's correct.
Is it worth having a discussion about maybe tampering that back, that 3%? When
Sure.
you're talking about laying off staff, I mean, maybe we have a 1% or a 0% growth in reality. I just.
I don't have a problem with that at all.
A point of discussion is all.
We've had that discussion. We've looked at the numbers, and unfortunately, it's not that substantial, because the employees that are left that are not contractual, union contract, there's not that many. And so we can certainly do that. That doesn't bother me at all. It's just, we can get that number, it's just not as substantial as we would hope it would be. But we can certainly get that figure.
I just didn't know if people wanted to talk about it.
I think it's a great idea. It's just, again, part of our goal last year was to kind of get us competitive, reset.
Right.
We put out a lot of funding to increase wages for everybody in the city to try and get us through, COVID, and we were losing staff to get that competition. So with the remaining staff, it's just going back a little bit, but again, that is not an issue at all for us. If we have to do that, we certainly will. It was on the list. So I'm glad you brought it up. It was gonna be brought up eventually, so yes.
I think it'd be helpful if we could see, and I'm not sure how much you can do this, but if we could see, okay, if the across-the-board raises were moved back to, let's say, 1 or 1.5% or whatever, here's how much it would save versus other options that we're talking about, here's what it would save.
We can easily do that.
Thank you.
Yep, again, we ran out of time to get all this ready, or we would have had it for you today.
Right.
Everything that came out in the last little bit it's been difficult, so we still have that in process being calculated, it's just we don't know what it is at this point in time.
I have one question and then a comment. I guess the question I have is just, if we do all of these things, you started out the session this morning by saying you wanted to make changes, or you're recommending changes, so we're not having to deal with these budgeting issues every year. Are the things that we were discussed this morning, are they going to lead us toward that? So the next couple of years, we may not have to discuss these same issues, or is this really just a kind of a one-year-as-you-go thing?
Right now, what we've discussed is to get us to where we survive another year with a reasonable fund balance. I don't even know if I can say reasonable, it's less than half what it in theory should be. So what we discussed at this point is to get to that item.
Okay.
Now, as far as staff reductions, will everybody that was put on leave go? Of course not. We will try to rework, as I said before, multiple positions to bring back if possible. It may not be everybody. That's the hardest part of this whole thing. How do you not? It's about funding availability, what we can and can't do. But if you want to continue to keep all staff, that's fine. It's your prerogative as well. But at some point, the largest portion of the budget, which is staffing, has got to be addressed.
So basically, just in general, 50,000-foot view on this, is that if we want to try to go forward so that we're building cash reserves and we're not having these budgeting discussions every year, really what we're looking at is staffing reductions.
This year. I would hope to not do it going forward. And again, there's a few other revenue sources we'll get into soon that we can talk about. It doesn't change the fact that our largest portion is
Right.
personnel, and that cost goes up every single year, regardless of raises or not. You have insurance increases, you have FICA, IPERS, all that, it all continues to increase every single year.
But not temporary staff reductions, we're looking at basically permanent staffing
Yes.
reductions to get there. So that brings
That's part of the
my
process.
part of it, yeah. That brings me to my comment. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, as long as we can continue to provide, basically, we're pretty close to the same level of services.
Right.
And like the part with the city attorney, that's really, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yep.
Because we can provide the same level of services without having staff people. And some of these other staffing things that we've talked about, I'm not as familiar with, so I'm not as comfortable with it. If it comes down to us, that the changes that have been suggested are going to have an impact on what the citizens see day to day, I would rather find some other way that we can do this than have those kinds of staffing issues.
Sure.
If the staffing issues you suggested are going to simply consolidate departments, do things more effectively, do it more efficiently, okay, that's something that we need to do, whether it's a budget issue or not a budget issue. But if it's going to be, we're going to be not being able to provide the services that we have in the past, you know, one of the comments with the library, they may have to cut hours, that kind of thing. And I would prefer to find some other place that we were, I don't know where that would be, frankly, that's the problem, but that's my opinion.
I understand it completely, and I can assure you that we would not bring you something that was going to worsen the situation, or we wouldn't have brought it. And I'd have laid this all on you and said, hey, we have $500,000, what do you want to do? That's the goal of what we've tried to do the last chunk of time, is to find areas that we can outsource that will not affect us or the public. The public won't even notice a number of these pieces. The areas where we do think it's potentially an issue, we're going to try to rework and continue, because not all the reductions that we put out there are actually baked into here. We know there's some that have to come back, and there's some expense that has to come back. But our goal was to not have somebody's position discussed without them having any idea it was gonna happen. And you find out Monday or through Facebook, or God knows who's texting what out there, and then all their spin on it, because that's what's gonna happen, I'm sure it already is.
Yeah.
Our goal is to at least make them aware this is a possibility, and that was it. And every one of them we talked to individually, face to face, we were told that HR would contact them next week to see what goes on forward. Until we hear from you, we didn't know. So it was a courtesy to let them know the possibility exists. It's not a definite, it was not this is a done deal. That was never said to any of them at all. It's a possibility, but we need to figure out what else is going to happen. So that's what I said, if you'd rather just keep everybody, that's fine. We can look at some other options, but then there's other items you're gonna have to discuss that you're not gonna like either.
Right.
So it's a matter of what your palate is. There's only a few other revenue options that exist out there, and we'll just jump into them right now. We've talked about one of them, they're speed cameras. Some people don't like them, they think they're terrible. I think they catch people breaking the law, so I guess I disagree with that. And the other item is gonna be franchise fees, because we don't have that currently as a city either, except for cable. And there's a litany of cities that have those fees, and basically for those that are watching or texting, franchise fees are a charge against the utility, whether it be our local utility, which already does pay us a pilot or a payment in lieu of taxes, or it's a charge against Mid-American Gas, Electric of a certain percentage. The beauty is they pass it straight on to the customer. So then it's the rest of the public that is now picking up those fees, whether it's nonprofits, churches, schools, everybody picks up additional fees now to fund this as well. That's what a franchise fee is. That's why they're not very popular either, but that's one of the few sources of revenue that we still have our ability to look at. And like I said, then the other would be speed cameras, which while there's always a bill to remove them every year, it hasn't happened in 12 years. That is where a lot of cities have gone as well. Now, it's not to generate revenue. Some think that's what it was. That was never our intent to start with. But if it helps to offset costs for public safety, fire, police, ambulance, which is all general fund, I don't have an issue with it. If someone wants to come into town and be going 11 miles an hour over the speed limit, we're not hitting people at 2 miles an hour, it's 11. So you're coming in the city 65 miles an hour, that's when you get a ticket at 66. Not 59, not 60, 66 miles an hour. When you come in on a 55-mile-an-hour road is what you get for a ticket. And it's a choice that people make. It's not like you don't see them, they're not broadcast ahead of time. All the signs and this big god-awful thing sticking out in the air, it's right there. You have a choice. And so that's where, you know, I've talked to Chief briefly about it, we've talked about it briefly. I don't advocate one way or another, I'm saying it's an option that helps alleviate some of the issues we're talking about. If we have concerns about some of the cuts or reductions we brought to you, those are the avenues we have.
Right.
Otherwise, we can cut all the stuff out of here and we can trim 2% out of each budget, nickel dime this and that, in the end, we're still short $1 million probably. Or we can address staffing, which is our largest expense in almost every department, every budget here. And so, I just want people to understand this is not me on some podium directing what you're gonna do. This is us bringing every option we can to the table for you to consider and have a discussion about, so that we have direction to move forward. None of this was pleasant, I've not enjoyed any of this, but that's the job that I have to do, that's what you pay me to do, so that's where we sit. So I guess I'm looking to you for direction as to what do you want to do? Do you want to address staffing? Do you want to leave it another year? Do you want to look at these other options of revenue? Do you want to not touch it either? We can just see where it puts us on our fund balance. Maybe we're at 6% and 2%, and I guess we just ride it out and we hope that it goes well for us in the next year or so and that everybody feels good about it. And if that's what we're at, then it's not the job I'm wanting to do.
Yeah, I don't think delaying any of this is helpful. I think, we're elected to make difficult decisions while keeping the whole of what's good for the city at the forefront. So I realize this was very difficult. I'm sure yesterday was not a good day, meeting with valued employees.
It was harder for them than it was for me, unfortunately, and I didn't enjoy any of it for them either, so.
And so I appreciate that you handled it thoughtfully, the way you did. Because you're right, we don't want people learning that their jobs are potentially at stake through social media or through the grapevine. I think that, you're not asking for a vote from us today, but I think you're asking us permission to explore what you want to do, whether you reallocate those staff, if possible, to other departments, whether you decide to lay off people, and I think you need to proceed with that.
Right.
I think the equipment, the deferments or eliminations that you've talked about, the coding, et cetera, none of those were fluff, but I think those are good decisions that you and the staff came to. The one I struggle with, I think, the most is the pool. But I understand if we need to close that. I think that we need to focus on a new pool and how to do that, whether it's a remodeled pool or a brand-new pool or what, in the most cost-effective way we can for long-term benefit. So that, I think, is the cut, other than the staffing cuts, that bothers me the most. I think we should explore revenue streams. The franchise fees, I'm not crazy about because it goes down to every ratepayer. I think I would rather have people who break the law contribute to helping us with our debt problems than every person who uses utilities. And so I'm in favor of exploring traffic cameras. Again, our primary purpose for bringing that up originally was not revenue. It was safety and the fact that we have people driving 70 miles an hour down Bremer Avenue. So.
Just the one guy.
Just the one guy.
He does it every day.
Right. But again, so I think you should explore that as an option. Is it going to solve all our problems? No. But it serves multiple purposes. Those are my thoughts.
Before we go a lot further, I'll ask Val again, I'll put you on the spot. So from a timing standpoint, because if we do go down this route, we have to put in some kind of funding estimate of some sort in order to balance this thing out, or we're gonna go with some negative number that the state's gonna say you can't do that. What is our time frame for having to have a final on this, so that we can get to hearing, we can get to publication, because now we have all those additional things, thanks to them. We have to publish ahead of time to be done by mid-April, which there'll be a month we're gonna be looking at each other, because we can't do anything, we've published. So what is our deadline to get this finished, at least some sense of putting together a part before we go to hearing? Which a hearing, you can always go down, you just can't go up.
I would have to have it known, everything set in stone, what we want to do for sure before March 4th.
Okay.
So we do have some time.
Because the final hearing is when? The final?
I have to
Well,
send
we'll
it
have to
out.
start-
We have to send a mailing out, so I have to get
Right.
the information to the auditor so they can get that mailing out.
Because we don't have to do the vote for the maximum
Right,
levy
that
this
was
year. They
replaced by
took that out,
the-
but they've got all these other.
Severed everything to the auditor by the 15th, and so it'd still have to be done by then anyway. And like Val said, the March 4th gives her a little time to make sure this works in the system. Because everything we've done, we've not proofed it through the system to the
Right.
penny.
Right.
In theory, it works, the numbers are good, it's just we are not like to the dollar, to the
So
penny.
she has to have her set data by March 4th to send it to the auditor by March 15th.
I'd like it a lot earlier than that.
They need it,
because-
Preferably
they
before
need
March
it by March 5th, actually.
5th?
Yes.
Oh,
So, I need it before then even.
Okay, okay.
So we can have another meeting at some point in time, but somehow this is gonna have to get locked
Yeah.
up. So we have something to go to the hearing with, which again, you can always go down at hearing, it just can't go up. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do, is vet out everything we can get done here today and what your preferences are, so we can at least move forward with something.
Right.
Well, if we're looking at camera enforcement fines as a source of revenue, we really can't build that into this budget because that might be a while before that actually happens. And we're gonna,
Timing, chief, I mean, we'd be done sooner than you think. It's,
Need to be in there, so otherwise you're looking July 25.
Yeah, so you would have to do your ordinance first, and then, which we all know it takes 3 readings. And then the turnaround time, they told me from the vendors would be anywhere between 30 to 90 days, depending on how much work they have to do. So July 1 would not be impractical to think could be operational.
but we were gonna put that in the budget as a revenue source. And the budget needs to be done, drop dead date March 4th. We would need to do that very rapidly here.
we'd want to put an estimate of what we think it would generate, which we have plenty of data from other cities that have them, which is almost everybody around us, seems like anymore. To what that draw has been, put in a reasonable amount that's not crazy.
I'd be uncomfortable with that unless we'd actually decided as a council that we wanted to go forward with it.
I agree completely. That's why we're starting to have these discussions. Are you in favor of going forward or not? When do we do that? Because, again, this is not, you don't have to do it. And like I said, we'll build with what we build, but there's only so much we can do.
That really needs to be, well, we already have no, we don't have, next Monday's not a council session.
No, we
2
could
months.
We could do February 19th as the first
Yeah.
reading.
So we would almost have to have February 19th to at least get the discussion rolling on it.
What are the setup costs for it, and what are the potential amounts that you'd
assume that the
earn from
revenue
it?
would.
There's no
offset
cost
that.
to it.
Because the vendor sets it up.
The fee they take from it, which we have estimated, it's like 30%, what everybody seems to be paying for it. It's hard to say how much it would be, because you would hope people would see that and slow down.
Right.
That is the ultimate
Right.
purpose.
Right.
Less speed is safer throughout the community in general, that is the purpose. Yet, you'd be amazed how much money people, because they don't slow down. Sitting there right in front of you telling you, hey, this is gonna happen. You blow through it, here's your ticket. So I would have to look at some other cities and what they've had go on and what it would look like, some sizable comparable ones. It's really hard to say right now. what
There
that
wouldn't be
would
a setup
generate.
fee for it.
No,
to
I
budget.
don't think there's anything like that.
The presentation.
Yeah.
I think it
was.
was into the cost, so.
So again, we're not advocating this is something we have to do. I don't want people to think that we're on some dictator style roll. It's not up to me.
Well, this is not the first time we've discussed it.
It's not.
Right? We heard the presentation, we've discussed it before as a safety measure, I think.
And I think it still is.
Yeah.
A safety measure. Lower speed is much safer from an accident standpoint and everything else. It just has a dual benefit as well.
Last week, there was another bill introduced down in Des Moines to basically eliminate speed cameras.
Yeah, same guy every
Traffic
year.
enforcement cameras, yeah.
Same guy last 12 years has put that in there.
And one of the reasons why he introduced it was because he was concerned that there were so many small towns in Iowa that were putting in traffic enforcement cameras as a revenue source. I mean, just basically as baldly as a revenue source. And I was thinking, yeah, they have to do that because you cut all the other revenue sources.
Right? It's only a revenue source if you break the law.
Yeah, which is the point. It's kind of like a sin tax. You know, if you don't sin, you don't get taxed. So.
Yeah, I think the legislature doesn't understand. I mean, the money's going to come from somewhere to run a town,
When
run a city.
when we discussed this the last time, I mean, there was some hesitancy, I think, on doing this, but not an absolute violation. So I think that we need to do some more discussions. I don't know if you want to do that this morning or not, but.
This is your meeting. I'm here as long as you need me to be, so is staff. So it's up to
My
you.
concern, I don't, and it is a revenue raiser, to tell you the truth.
Sure.
There's no sense trying to cloak it, but I have absolutely no problem with stoplight cameras. Because everybody knows a stoplight is there, you have to stop for it. If you don't stop for it, you're breaking the law. And everybody knows that red means stop, et cetera. The problem that I have is necessarily with speed cameras is the fairness of it. The one question I've been dealing with, we should have had this when we had the presentation, are these permanently installed in a certain location, or are these movable kinds of devices?
In most cases, they're permanent, but you can get mobile ones.
Okay.
So the vendor would provide us one as well. Waterloo has one, they have a car that moves around and so they can hit hot spots. What I've thought, and they also have trailers like we have, what I felt is that we have a speed trailer right now that we can hit those problem areas and move that around, still use that as an educational piece and not have every time what we're doing that type of enforcement to be a penalty.
Okay.
So we can still do that warning.
Well, the mobile ones I am much more comfortable with, because if the object is to keep people from speeding, you want to keep them from speeding wherever they are. And if you move it around, if you only have it in one spot, you're going to keep them from speeding on that spot, because within 2 weeks you put the camera in, everybody in town is going to know where it is. So they're going to be driving down the highway at wherever, 4th Street at 60 miles an hour, a block before they get to the speed camera, they slow down to 40, and then a block on the other side of the speed camera. Once they're by it, they go back to 60. That doesn't really do a whole lot for, it may even make it more dangerous because you got people going different speeds. If you have a movable one that is not permanently installed in location and people aren't aware of where it is, it's going to be much more likely that they're going to obey the law wherever it is that they are, and not just at the location of that speed camera. The second issue I have with a permanently installed speed camera is, unless there is a sign right there where the speed camera is, it says, here is a speed camera, slow down, the only people that you're going to be affecting there, the only people that are actually in danger of getting well, I guess there's two types. People that are in danger of getting a ticket. One is the people that are really stupid. They think that the sign, they're never going to get caught anyway. And the other people is from people that are out of town who don't know where, visitors who don't know that the speed camera is there.
But there are rules about how to do it, right? You have to notify, they have to have an adequate distance to slow down. The DOT has to approve it, especially on
Yeah, but
Highway
that's
3.
you got a sign on the outside of town, a little sign
No,
that
it's
says
right
traffic
before the
enforced.
camera. It has to be right before the camera.
I've never seen that.
That's how it is in
Yeah.
Cedar Rapids, that's how it is in Waterloo. It says this town, there's a speed camera coming
Speed
up,
camera
and if
ahead.
you look up in the air,
Little
there it
enforced,
is.
yeah.
Like shortly after you pass the sign. Because after we started talking about that, I started looking for them. Because my car actually shows me where they are.
Oh, yeah, I'm
And
not
so
very observant
you
then.
you get a warning that it's happening. And so some people ignore them. Some people don't have to think about it because they don't speed. But I think that they're ignoring speed limit signs, they're ignoring stoplights. People are human, right? They either don't care or they're thinking about something else or whatever. And so I think, there's multiple hoops you have to jump through in order to put these up. They have to follow a certain protocol. I think there's plenty of data based on what law enforcement can tell us and vendors about whether the mobile ones work better. Do people just slow down and speed up? Does it prevent accidents? From what we heard from that one vendor's presentation, they do. They help with safety. If they can be safe, help us be more safe, and then create a revenue stream, why wouldn't we look at it?
Well, I would not be in favor of it unless I was convinced that a sufficiently adequate notice was provided before people got to the speed camera that allowed them to slow down before they got to the speed camera.
I have a question, Chief. I know they take a picture of a violator and they run the plate, but is there the technology, is somebody running plates all the time? I mean, looking for people?
Yes.
Looking for, okay, so-and-so owns this car and we're looking for this person.
Yes, so you can, for an added fee or a deduction for your services, you can do, they're called license plate readers, LPRs, so you can include those as well.
And what's your opinion on that, or?
To be honest with you, I like the idea of it, and so there's a loop, right? So it's not like the data's going in permanently. What the data's doing is, just kind of like our cameras, they're doing a pre-event. So our cameras, when you see a law enforcement officer, they're always recording. But that gets looped. So as soon as they record, it has a 30-second pre-event. So if you say something to an officer, they hit something, and then you're going to get that data. So what we do with an LPR is if we have, a purple alert, silver alert, amber alert, we can put that data into the system. At that point, it gets sent out to the cameras, and then we can be looking for those license plates. The other thing is, if we have, we talked about a burglary that happened down there on First Street, it was in October a couple of years ago. When we found out that there was somebody from out of town, we got that notification fairly early off of a camera from the church. And so we had a license plate, and that was within enough time that we could have put that into the LPR to determine if that vehicle was in town. So what happened is that one of our investigators had to spend about 3 to 4 months going to every vehicle and looking for stickers, looking for a broken antenna from throughout the state to prove that that vehicle was or was not in the city of Waverly. We could have just put it into the system at that time, and it would have determined that vehicle would have been in Waverly. So there is a lot of benefit to it.
How many alerts do you generally receive in a month?
Oh,
Amber, silver, these different?
well, you get them on your
codes.
phone, so a few,
Okay.
yeah.
Not mobile per day?
No.
I am struggling because I feel like maybe I'm oversimplifying this in my brain, but to me, it seems like all we're talking about is enforcing our laws. And we're not talking about trying to snag people just for the purpose of raising revenue, but if somebody's breaking the law, we're talking about being able to enforce that. And I don't understand the argument of I should be able to go 66 as I'm coming into the city limits and not be penalized for it.
The question I have is who's supposed to be enforcing the law? Is it the
Meaning?
police officers, or is it somebody sitting in a desk in Chicago that's looking over computer data?
But as we heard during the
We're hiring our police
presentation,
officers to protect our community, but in this case, we're outsourcing it to somebody in another community that's looking at it.
but every plate that gets picked up is reviewed by one of our officers.
Right.
But
so-
does every plate get picked up is the other question I have.
Well, how
There's a
many
lot of-
police
there's a-
officers do you want a budget to hire?
Well, that's the question we have to address.
Well,
It is.
Is there's a lot of people that can put plate covers on that they block these. They can't see, they can't read the plates. I mean, we've got plate covers on cars that we can't, I as a person cannot even look at and see what their license plate is now. I don't know why those are illegal,
They're not.
but they're on cars and they're very hard to see, I mean, so if you have a hit and run, did you get the plate number on the car? No, couldn't solve it. It's got a
But I don't know if the
smoke
argument
over
is
cover or
that
whatever.
because you have, I don't know even what the percentage of motorists that would put a plate cover on to decide or not decide whether or not you would move forward with the program. And that's, so to me, it's technology, right? I was asked to bring, I was asked to bring forward information about on the public safety side of it. And everything we talked about today is dual purpose, every change, everything to the budget is, there's got to be more than one reason why we're doing something. And to me, I was brought forward to talk about public safety side of the benefit to the cameras. And so I know Rod mentioned about should they be a fixed location or should they be mobile? Well, I think it's just a decision on how you think they're more effective. And I think there's information out there. The reason why fixed work in certain areas is because you pick the most troubled areas. And you say, this is the area that we need to concentrate on. And the reason why we have selected and had speed studies done on 4th Street is because the difficulty it is for law enforcement to make safe traffic stops along that corridor. And we know that corridor continues to grow. And there is a halo effect through research, through those cameras, is that it's not, as soon as you see it slow down and you speed up. There is some of that. I think we can see that in Cedar Rapids. But you can also make the argument, doesn't that prove that it's effective? To be honest with you, when we had the K-9 program, one of the arguments was, Why would we have a canine program in the city of Waverly? Because as soon as we have one, we won't have drugs. People just know they won't be transporting drugs in their cars anymore. Well, if we know that we're going to put up speed cameras, and that's going to stop speeding in those particular areas, then I would argue that's an effective approach to that management. You look at the second page of the article I sent out. The reason why we'd want to include speed to the red lights is that you can see what happens when people are hit by vehicles. And this is through NHTSA. So if somebody is hit traveling 20 miles an hour, more likely 9 out of 10 of them will survive. But when you get up to over 40 miles an hour, 1 out of 10 is all it's going to survive. So that's the importance of speed reduction in your business districts. And that's what we were seeing. And that's why I brought in what I think it was August is when I presented on this last time. And the safety concerns just on Bremer Avenue at West and 4th Street there, where we had vehicles 400 in a week's time traveling 11 miles an hour over the speed limit. Where we have issues, I think the legislation, there are problems out there. I would hope I would never present anything, James would never present anything. We're not looking at, and I'm not going to talk about some of our border cities where they are issuing civil infractions for 2 to 3 miles an hour over the speed limit. We are really saying you won't receive a civil infraction until you're traveling 11 miles an hour over the speed limit. And I think I have it written down here. So, same speed, that's 175. If I pull you over, it's $175 is what it'll cost you for a police officer for that same infraction. And we're looking at 75 as the infraction, civil infraction, and it doesn't go on your license. And talking about budgeting purposes, every chief I've talked to, there has been a reduction. There will be a leveling off, but there has been a reduction of citations and infractions the longer they've been in place.
I want to make it absolutely clear to everybody here, I think maybe I've been misconstrued a little bit, which is my fault, that I am not opposed to speed cameras. What I want to do is make sure that people have the ability or are on notice, so they have every opportunity to reduce their speed and not be ticketed by a speed camera. So that's why I would not be opposed to speed cameras. Certainly I'm not opposed to the portable ones if they're moved around some. And I'm not opposed to a permanent location as long as there is a notice that there's a speed camera there so it doesn't turn into a speed trap. Because if the object is to slow people down, then they need to know that, hey, there's a speed camera here, I need to slow down. And if there isn't enough notice, that to me is not fair. I mean, it doesn't do what it's intended to do, is to slow people down. So my whole concern with this is that if we're putting a speed camera in a particular location, and 4th Street has been talked about a lot, let's make sure that there is adequate notice. I don't know what that looks like, but adequate notice that there is a speed camera here, and if you're speeding, we don't have to say 11 miles over, because then people will drive 10 miles over, but if you're speeding, you're going to get something. So that's my concern. I'm not opposed to doing this. I think that, yes, people should be obeying the law, and I totally understand the issue that we have with the safety of officers who are giving speeding tickets on that particular street. I just want to make sure that people are given every opportunity to not speed, and if they still speed, fine, shoot them a ticket.
We're on the same page. James and I met with the DOT. There are certain requirements, and I think our intent is to do everything required and above. There's no question about that. And it's just a lot easier to do that with fixed locations as opposed to mobile, because now you're talking about having to move those,
Right.
those pre-warnings on those mobiles also.
Yeah.
So,
And in a sense then, going to speed cameras, by your argument, is a lot more fair than when the patrolman parks in the senior center parking lot and I don't see him until I'm right there.
Tagging people coming over the hill.
Well, and then he might decide to give you a warning, but someone else he might give a ticket to.
Right, so.
And how do they decide
So
that?
there's some
And is it more
I mean,
objective?
The two things I
Is it more
think.
objective to just have a camera?
Right, the two reasons I support speed cameras is, number one, it's a more effective use of police officers' time. Is they don't have to be setting up speed traps, it's always there, they're getting easy reading, the police officers can be doing things that are better suited for their time. And number two, it's a question of equity. It's not a question of the police officer says, oh, this guy looks safe, I'm just gonna give him a warning, and this guy looks sketchy, I'm gonna give him a ticket. There is no decision-making that goes on. Everyone is treated exactly the same by a speed camera. Doesn't care color of your skin, how long your hair is, you get a ticket. So I mean, that's kind of my biggest reason in supporting the speed cameras is just efficiency and equity.
And it doesn't put the officers in the
In
position
front.
then of having to,
Or having to knock on a strange door and, find out who's gonna open it. Are they having a bad day, they want to take it out on the police officer.
And this isn't probably germane to this discussion, I know, but there are several things I think we can do to make 4th Street a little bit safer. I would not mind having a discussion about reducing the speed limit to 35 on 4th Street from 40. I think 40 was okay when we had 10% of the businesses that we have now, but with all the other businesses that we have going in on 4th Street, it might be time to reassess some of those things. But that's a discussion for
We'll
another
get
day.
pushed back on that, but you're probably right.
Thanks, Rich. Okay, other further discussion?
Well, I think kind of going back to the question that James was originally asking, in terms of eliminating departments, I'm fully on board with eliminating legal services. Engineering and vegetation management, I'm less excited about, but I can accept it because I will understand the cost savings there. Closing the pool, again, not excited about it, but I would rather close the pool than lay off a couple of police officers. I think that's kind of, the next option. So I'm not, again, I think this is not a question of the budget I want as much as the budget that I can live with. Yeah, and again, speed cameras, I'm in support of speed cameras. I think that they're, public safety, it's taxing the right people. We're basically taxing their ability to speed. People can choose whether or not they want to pay that tax. Franchise fees, I'm not excited about those because I think it's a regressive tax. It kind of taxes people who can least afford to pay it. But I also think that that's the direction the state is trying to force us. So I'm not in favor of it, but I think, if it comes to it, we're gonna have to be prepared to do it someday. I think I hit all your boxes.
You did, sir. Thank you.
I guess I would pretty much echo what Brian said. I feel like I should state more specifically, but I think all of these things are tough changes to make. But I feel confident that city staff has just done every somersault possible to try to figure out how do we go forward in the best way, and I feel like I'm in support of the things that we've discussed today. If we have to do it, we have to do it.
Well, that's why I want to be clear, you don't have to do it. This is a decision you have to make. It's again, we'll do what we have to do.
But the cost of not doing it,
Yes.
the cost of not doing it is a decreased fund balance.
Right.
So that we are basically putting ourselves at a greater risk in case of disaster. If something does go wrong, if there is a flood, if there is, another global pandemic, we are going to be forced to cut and not strategically to like make budget.
Not even disaster,
I mean,
really.
But, you know, but I
Just
mean,
some
or an economic
unexpected-
downturn.
Some
Sure.
unexpected expense.
Sure, but I mean,
Yeah,
we,
I don't want this to be like the Green Bridge. I don't want this to be
Kicking
something
it
where
down the
we don't do something,
for so
even though it's
long.
painful, right? And we wait, and it gets kicked down the road for 10 or 15 years until we're really in dire straits. So, I mean, it's unpleasant, and I wish we did not have to do it, but I think the ideas you put forth are solid and well thought out, and, you know, you need, I think, our permission to move forward so that you can look to who can you reallocate, where can you share equipment, what do you need to do next?
Well, and I also want to be clear, we are owning this decision. This is not James's decision.
No.
I mean, I don't want the public to
Right.
think that James is telling us what to do and we're just following his orders. I think,
God, would that be nice?
no, I think city staff has gone through the process of trying to find the least unpleasant option. And, I mean,
And efficient, you know, trying to, if we have to do these things, what can we do to make city business more efficient as we do them?
And I think we have to recognize, there will be another pandemic, or another flood, or another big economic downturn. That's the way of our world. There will be things that will happen, just like when any of us is managing our households and we know that the roof's gonna have to be replaced at some point. We can't just budget for how to get through the next 12 months.
And from my understanding, that's basically what we're trying to do, is just get through the next 12 months, plus a little bit. If we wanted to do something even harsher, there would be even more cuts. And that's what I think folks need to be resident of.
Yeah, we have another list we haven't even talked about that takes us to a much better fund balance, but the amount of bodies that are involved are devastating, and we don't even want to talk about it. But when we first met, I told you we would have a plan, how we get where we are, how we get ahead of what it is. And like I said, that's when it gets really ugly. This is not even the ugly part, that's when it gets really ugly. So I appreciate the commentary, but that is kind of what we're trying to get to, is where do you sit on these situations, whether it's staff, pool, cameras, franchise fees, so we know how to go forward. And this is not it's done. Now, we will try to continue to reorganize depending on what you can say today, but there is still a hearing. That is when it actually truly votes. This is not it.
Right. So when is our next discussion of this?
It could be as early as the 19th, or if you want a special meeting, you can do it in between then, but at some point, we'll lock down what you tell us today, provide you the information of what it finally looks like, and we'll be able to go back through and determine what is the true impact on staff. Is it a lot? Is it a minimal amount? We don't know yet, but we're looking to figure that out. And then the other things we've pulled out to maybe try and fund what we can, what can't we. So that'll be the next phase of this. So as we're going, we're building the groundwork to move forward with some significant changes to bring you back as to this is what it looks like now.
Could I ask, just for perspective as we think about the future?
Sure.
Is there still some effort at the state level to take away lost? Or not take it away, but,
Take it away and give it back?
yeah.
get some of it back.
I don't know that we've seen that bill yet, but it's only February, and you still have months to go, so nothing has come out yet, but that was one of the things talked about last fall, was to redo TIF again, and which for us, we don't use a lot of TIF compared to a lot of communities. We're very forthright in bits and pieces. You know, as we looked, we have 2 development agreements total. There's some cities doing that in a week. We have 2 total, like, that's it. We don't use TIF extensively because of what it does to affect on other areas, but we use it when we need to. As far as the local option sales tax, 2-3 years already they've tried. I would assume it'll happen again. Take it away, give it back. Someday it doesn't come back. You know how that all works. It's no different than backfill or anything else. It's just get control of it, and then eventually they bleed it out for their own purposes in the initial time. But I've not heard or seen anything yet. I just know that was one of the primary discussions in the fall, that would be occurring this year.
I would anticipate that when it does come forward, it will not come forward with fanfare, and it will be done quickly and silently, and then we'll wake up and find out what bill has passed.
That's how some of the other
Which-
items.
Which is what they have done in like previous reforms.
And that could be potentially devastating.
Yeah, I would hope that they would have some sense about not taking that, and not giving it back. I mean, you can't do that right away. This is all done local level, local control, local votes by the public, I mean, I don't even know how it can be done, but the discussion is that they take it back. Even if you're a city that didn't want it, you're gonna have it now. That's just the way it is, and then you'll get it and give it back. But I've not seen any of that this year so far. So, God, I can't even utter it.
Sorry, I brought it
No,
up.
no, but it was a legitimate question that has been raised, and will it not, I don't know. But we've not heard anything yet, so we'll have to see.
I'd like to see you continue with what you presented here, James.
Thank you, Brent.
You know, look for some other funding sources in some of these things.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to mirror what Brian said, ditto. Yeah, I would be concerned about franchise fees also because they have the major impact on people who are less able to pay them.
That's why we haven't brought them up till now, because we didn't.
Yeah, it's not something I would take a look at unless it was an absolute dire necessity. I think I made my position on the automated traffic control things clear. I'm not opposed to them as long as they're done in a fair way and people are notified of it. And I spoke before about, what I thought the priority should be as far as employees, that, my concern would be to make sure that we did not diminish the services that were being provided to citizens. So
Yes, sir.
if there's some way that we can avoid having those kinds of staffing rearrangements, I would prefer to do that, but I understand that may not be a possibility.
Okay.
Jen, any additional?
I agree.
Okay. I guess my final thoughts on it, I echo a lot of what people have said. As far as the staffing, my two biggest concerns are we able to still maintain the services to the community? By restructuring, even if it's a slight downgrade, obviously when we added, say, the vegetation management, that gave us a different outlook in terms of how we were providing services. We were able to do a little bit more, and so that'll have to peel back a little bit if we combine that. The other concern I have with the staff reductions and the restructuring is that we still maintain a certain level of control at the city level of what we are providing, that we're not relying entirely on people outside of us to make decisions for us or be doing a lot of that we're still the final arbiter of that. Comment on franchise fees, I made the comment when we reinstituted the cable TV franchise fees that I didn't think that was fair because there were certain people in the city that satellite TV or Waverly Utilities were not paying that franchise fee. It was only those paying the other outside companies for cable. And so that's a concern in terms of franchise fees, in terms of fairness. I understand not charging those that are least available to pay it, but the other thing about franchise fees is the same as when we talk about water fees and sewer fees and things. There are places in town that do not pay property taxes. And so water fees, sewer fees, that they do pay into based on usage. Not saying that I am wholeheartedly going into wanting franchise fees, but that's just my comment on that. And I will say that I am opposed to traffic cameras on a number of I don't want to say violently opposed because I can do it peacefully. But I am opposed on a number of philosophical grounds on the use of traffic cameras and how how they are used in terms of delaying or pushing off who's actually responsible for enforcing laws. As far as that.
I hope I understand.
I think the 19th would be good to have at least an initial so that Val knows either we need to have another meeting special meeting to finalize the budget, or that she's got the numbers to go through so she's ready for the 4th.
Okay.
Or before the 4th preferably. That's my input on that. Any other discussion from the council for the good of cause?
Just thank you for all the work that you and staff did over the last couple of weeks to try to figure out our options and present them in a way that we can comprehend.
Sure.
I was gonna make just one more comment. As we're talking about all of these things, it keeps occurring to me that I think it's important that we don't lose sight of continuing to try to have our community grow. And certainly, that's a difficult thing when things are really tight financially, but some of the things that we've recently talked about, for instance, with regard to changing the process for economic development and so on. I think none of us feel absolutely certain what that's gonna look like, but I feel sort of excited about the possibilities that and I think that's important for us to keep in mind when we're so focused on the hard parts, is let's also really work on doing things, whether that's, increasing our affordable housing and getting businesses to town and those kinds of things that will continue to make our community grow.
Well, I appreciate that, because a lot of the stuff that we're trying to bring to you is just different. We continue to keep going. As we keep going, we're gonna get just what we're getting. If we don't start to alter somehow, whether it's economic development, it's a 180-degree difference. Will it work? I think it will. If it doesn't, we can go back to what we had. None of this is permanent forever. That's why you see things brought up. We used to have fuel tanks. Now we don't have them anymore. We think we want them again. Stuff cycles back through, depending on the circumstances and the community and the economic items we're dealing with. So nothing we're bringing you is permanent. It's what we think is best at the time it is. And that's why you're here, to agree or disagree. For us, it's just direction. There's nothing personal. We don't have a real big dog in it. It's just, we want to bring you options for you to consider in case you haven't. And that way we know what's going forward the best way we can.
Well, I mean, there are costs to changing direction. I mean,
Yes.
we did vegetation management. I think that was successful, but I also think that, there are budgetary pressures that are causing us to look back at that. If we go away from that and then maybe 8-10 years decide we want to go back to it, we're losing that experience. We may have to find someone new. We won't have the same person to plug right back in there. So there's certainly a cost to changing directions. I don't want to pretend like there isn't. But sometimes we have to try those new things to see if, there is a better way.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, Jan.